Hello everyone and welcome back to the Horror Hut. Now, I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off I thought it would be a fun idea if everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also like and subscribe if you are enjoying the episodes. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. I had been working late that night, later than usual. It was dark by the time I left the office, and the cold air hit me the second I stepped outside. I was exhausted, barely keeping my eyes open during the drive home. I didn't even think about stopping for food. I just wanted to get home, shower, and collapse in bed. When I pulled up to the house, everything looked normal. It was one of those quiet, suburban neighborhoods where nothing much ever happens. The kind where every house looks almost the same. I parked the car in the driveway, grabbed my purse, and walked to the front door. The light above the door wasn't on, but I didn't think much of it. Maybe the bulb had burned out. I was fumbling with my keys, too tired to care that it took me a couple of tries to get the key into the lock. I finally got the door open and stepped inside. The house felt a little colder than usual, but again, I didn't think anything of it. I just assumed the heat hadn't kicked on yet. I kicked off my shoes and tossed my purse on the small table by the door, like I always did. The hallway was dark, so I reached out and flipped the switch to turn on the light. Nothing. The light didn't come on. I frowned, thinking maybe the power had gone out. But then I saw the faint glow from the living room, like there was a light on in there. I walked down the hallway, thinking about how much I just wanted to get in bed. That's when I noticed something wasn't right. The hallway felt off, like it was slightly different. My feet brushed against a rug I didn't recognize, and I remember thinking I don't have a rug here. But I was so tired, I didn't stop to figure it out. I turned the corner into the living room, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't my house. The furniture was different, the walls were painted a different color, and the pictures on the wall weren't mine. I froze, heart pounding, trying to make sense of it. I couldn't understand how I'd walked into the wrong house. How did I even unlock the door? Suddenly, I heard a voice behind me. Low, gruff, and full of confusion. "Who the hell are you?" I spun around, my stomach dropping. A man was standing in the doorway to what I guessed was the kitchen. He was holding a gun. My heart felt like it stopped. I didn't say anything, just stood there like an idiot, staring at the gun. It was pointed down at the floor, but the fact that it was in his hand at all was enough to send my brain into overdrive. "What are you doing in my house?" he asked again, his voice louder this time, and he took a step closer. I couldn't move. My feet were glued to the floor, and my mind was racing. I didn't know what to say or how to explain myself. I hadn't even processed that I wasn't in my own house until right then. I'm sorry," I stammered, finally finding my voice. "I thought this was my house. I don't know how. I must have made a mistake." He didn't lower the gun. His eyes narrowed, and he glanced over at the front door like he was trying to piece it together. "How the hell did you get in here?" he asked. I swallowed hard. I don't know. I used my key. I thought it was my house. I swear, I don't know how this happened. Please, I'm just trying to leave." He didn't respond at first, just stared at me, his grip tightening on the gun. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck, and my legs were shaking. I wanted to run, but I was terrified that if I moved too quickly, he'd think I was doing something suspicious and shoot me. "Show me your key," he said finally, his voice calmer but still firm. I fumbled in my pocket, pulling out the keyring with trembling hands. I held it up, showing him the key that had unlocked the door. He glanced at it, then back at me, still not lowering the gun. That doesn't make any sense, he muttered. That's not the key to this house. I know, I said, barely able to keep my voice steady. I must have. I don't know how I unlocked the door. It's the same model as my house, I guess. I didn't realize until just now that this isn't mine. He stared at me for what felt like forever, sizing me up. I could see the gears turning in his head, trying to figure out if I was telling the truth or if this was some kind of setup. Finally, he lowered the gun just a little, enough that I could breathe again. You're telling me you just walked into the wrong house? He asked, his voice still suspicious. I nodded quickly, my throat tight. Yes, I swear. I didn't mean to. I just want to leave. He looked me up and down, probably trying to figure out if I was lying. I didn't blame him. The whole situation was so bizarre, I could barely believe it myself. After what felt like an eternity, he sighed and stepped back, still holding the gun but not aiming it at me anymore. Get out, he said, his voice gruff but no longer as threatening. Now! I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and hurried toward the front door, my legs still shaky. I grabbed my purse off the table where I had thrown it and practically sprinted outside. As soon as I was out the door, I heard it slam shut behind me, the sound of the lock clicking into place. I stood there on the porch for a moment, trying to catch my breath. My hands were still shaking, my heart racing. I looked around and finally noticed that the house next door, the one I should have walked into, had its lights on. It looked exactly like the one I had just come out of, down to the same mailbox and driveway. I could barely tell them apart, and I had walked into the wrong one in my exhaustion. I didn't know what to do at that point. Part of me wanted to knock on the door and explain myself again, but I was too shaken to even think about it. I just wanted to get to my actual house and lock the door behind me. I walked down the porch steps and over to my car, which was still parked in the driveway of the wrong house. I got in, started the engine, and pulled into the driveway next door, finally in front of my own house. I sat there for a moment, staring at my front door, the right door this time. I still couldn't believe what had just happened. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were white, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Eventually, I got out of the car and went inside. My house was warm, familiar. Everything was where it should be, just as I had left it. But I couldn't shake the feeling of what had just happened. I double-checked the lock on my door that night and every night since. The memory of that man's voice, the way he had looked at me with suspicion, the gun in his hand, it still lingers. Every time I come home late, I make sure to look twice at the house before I go inside. I never want to make that mistake again. A few weeks ago, I came home late from work. It had been one of those long days where everything went wrong, and I was just ready to drop. I remember it so clearly because, right when I got to my apartment door, I reached into my pocket and felt nothing. My keys weren't there. I checked my bag, my jacket, even my car, but they were nowhere to be found. I felt that sinking feeling in my gut as I realized I must have dropped them somewhere along the way. It was late, and I was tired, so after pacing around for a few minutes and considering my options, I decided to call a locksmith. The idea of breaking a window to get in crossed my mind, but I wasn't about to deal with the hassle of replacing glass. I just wanted to get inside. I found a locksmith online, someone local who advertised 24/7 service. I gave him a call, and within about 30 minutes, a guy showed up. He was in his late 40s, maybe early 50s, a bit scruffy but nothing out of the ordinary. He seemed professional enough. He had a van with his company's name on the side and all the tools you'd expect a locksmith to have. We exchanged a few words, just basic small talk. He asked how I lost my keys, and I told him I wasn't sure, just that they vanished somewhere between work and home. He nodded, said it happens all the time. I remember thinking he was friendly, maybe a little too chatty for how late it was, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get inside. He worked quickly, and within about 10 minutes, he had the door unlocked. He even offered to make me a new set of keys right there in his van. I figured that was a good idea since I didn't have a spare on me, so I said sure. He cut 2 new keys while I stood there on the porch, trying to stay awake. When he handed me the new keys, he gave me a smile and said, "You never know when these might come in handy." I didn't think much of it at the time. I thanked him, paid the fee, and he drove off. For the next couple of days, everything was fine. I went about my usual routine: work, grocery shopping, coming home late, all that. But then, one evening, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. I was getting out of my car in the parking lot when I saw him, the locksmith. He was standing across the street, just leaning against a wall. He wasn't doing anything, just looking in my direction. At first, I thought maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe he had another job nearby, or he was just passing through. I tried to ignore the weird feeling creeping up my spine and went inside. The next day, I saw him again. This time, he was sitting in his van a few buildings over. It wasn't parked in front of my place, but it was close enough that I could see him. He wasn't doing anything, just sitting there, staring out the windshield. That's when the unease really started to settle in. I began to feel paranoid. Every time I stepped outside or came home, I found myself looking around, wondering if he'd be there again. And more often than not, he was. Always lingering nearby, never doing anything that would make it obvious he was watching me, but it felt deliberate. Like he wanted me to know he was there without making it too obvious. A week passed, and the sightings became more frequent. I'd see his van parked down the street in the morning when I left for work. He'd be in the parking lot when I got home. He never approached me, but I could feel his eyes on me every time. I started double-checking my locks, making sure they were secure every time I left the house. I even considered changing them, but I didn't want to believe this guy was up to something. I thought maybe I was overreacting, letting my imagination get the better of me. But then, one night, something happened that made it clear I wasn't imagining anything. I woke up to a noise. It was faint at first, like someone fiddling with something metal. My heart immediately started pounding, and I lay there in bed, listening, hoping it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But then I heard it again, louder this time. Someone was trying to unlock my front door. I jumped out of bed and grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, which turned out to be a heavy lamp from my nightstand. I moved as quietly as I could toward the door, my breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. My hands were shaking so badly that I nearly dropped the lamp. When I got close to the door, I listened. The sound of metal against metal was unmistakable now, and I could hear someone muttering under their breath. It was him. I just knew it was. For a moment, I froze. I didn't know what to do. Should I call the police? Should I confront him? My mind was racing, but then I heard the unmistakable sound of the lock clicking open. My stomach dropped. I knew I had only seconds before he'd be inside. I did the only thing I could think of. I slammed the lamp against the door as hard as I could. The noise was deafening in the silence of the apartment. There was a moment of complete stillness, and then I heard footsteps running away, fast. I waited, my whole body trembling, until I was sure he was gone. Then, I ran to the window and looked outside. His van was gone, and the street was empty. I locked the door again, this time using every lock and bolt I had. The next day, I filed a police report. They didn't seem too concerned at first, but when I told them about the locksmith and how I've been seeing him hanging around, they took it more seriously. They promised to send someone to keep an eye on the building, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. I didn't sleep much after that. Every little sound made me jump, and I kept replaying the moment he almost got inside. I couldn't believe how close I'd come to being face to face with him in my own home. The police never caught him. After that night, I never saw him again. No van, no sightings. It was like he disappeared. I changed the locks, got new keys from a different company, and tried to put the whole thing behind me. When I first moved into the house, I was relieved to get away from the chaos of the city. It was a small, quiet neighborhood. The kind of place where people still wave at each other from their front yards and kids ride their bikes down the street. It felt safe, the kind of place where nothing bad could happen. I remember being excited about the fresh start. It wasn't a huge house, but it was perfect for me. 2 bedrooms, a little yard, just enough space to feel comfortable. The day I moved in, my neighbor introduced himself. His name was Jack, probably in his early 50s, tall with thinning hair and a bit of a beer belly. He seemed friendly, the kind of person who always wants to help. He brought over a plate of cookies and welcomed me to the neighborhood. I thought it was nice of him. We talked for a bit about the area, how long he'd been living there. He mentioned he lived alone, that his wife had passed away a few years ago, and he didn't have any kids. He seemed a little lonely, but harmless. I didn't think much of it. At first, everything seemed normal. Jack would wave when he saw me outside, make small talk if we bumped into each other while I was coming or going. He'd mention things like how the trash pickup worked, or recommend local places to eat. It was the kind of neighborly interaction I expected when I moved in. But after a few weeks, I started to notice he was around a lot more than I would have expected. One night, I was sitting in the living room, reading. I'd left the curtains open because it was a nice evening, and I liked the fresh air coming through the window. I remember glancing outside, and there he was, standing in his yard, looking directly at my house. At first, I thought maybe he was just out for a smoke or something, but he wasn't doing anything, just staring. It made me feel weird, so I closed the curtains and tried to brush it off. A few days later, I was in the kitchen washing dishes. I looked out the window and saw him again, standing by his side of the fence, staring at my house. This time it wasn't just a glance. He was watching me. I could feel it. I quickly turned away from the window, trying not to make it obvious that I'd seen him. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he didn't realize I could see him, or maybe he was just lost in thought. But then it kept happening. I'd be sitting on my porch, reading or just enjoying a quiet afternoon, and there he was, either in his yard or standing by his window, always looking over at me. Not smiling, not waving, just staring. It started to feel more like an intrusion than a neighborly gesture. He was always there. It didn't matter what time of day. Whenever I was home, he seemed to be nearby, watching. I started keeping the curtains closed most of the time, but even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, still watching. It was like he always knew when I was home. I never told him my schedule, but somehow, he seemed to know exactly when I left for work, when I came back, when I went out on the weekends. It felt too coincidental. One evening, I was getting ready for bed when I heard a knock at the door. It was almost 10 p.m., way too late for a neighborly visit. I looked through the peephole and saw Jack standing there, holding something in his hands. I didn't want to open the door, but I didn't want to be rude either. I opened it just a crack. "I noticed your porch light was flickering," he said, holding up a light bulb. "Thought you might want a new one." I hadn't noticed anything wrong with the light. It had been working fine the last time I checked. "Thanks," I said, trying to sound polite, "but it's working fine." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I just wanted to help. You can never be too careful, living alone and all. That last part made me uneasy. I hadn't told him I lived alone, but I guess it wasn't hard to figure out. I took the light bulb from him, thanked him again, and quickly closed the door. I could feel my heart racing, the sense of something being off growing stronger. After that night, I made a point to avoid him as much as possible. I stopped going outside unless I had to, and when I did, I tried to make sure he wasn't around. But it didn't stop him. He kept knocking on my door with random excuses, offering to help with yard work, asking if I needed anything from the store. One time, he even knocked just to tell me he'd seen a suspicious car in the neighborhood. It felt like he was trying to insert himself into my life, like he wanted to know every detail about what I was doing. The worst part was when I started noticing things out of place in my house. Small things at first: a window left open that I was sure I had closed, a door unlocked that I distinctly remember locking. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that I was imagining things. But then, one night, I came home from work and found the front door slightly ajar. I hadn't left it that way. My heart started racing as I stepped inside, every noise in the house suddenly feeling louder. I checked every room, every closet, but nothing seemed out of place. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been inside. I called a locksmith the next day and had all the locks changed, just to be safe. For a while, things seemed to calm down. I didn't see Jack as much, and I started to feel a little more at ease. But then one night, I woke up to a sound outside my window. I lay there in bed, listening. It was faint, like someone was moving around outside. I got up and slowly walked to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to peek outside. Jack was standing in my yard, right under my bedroom window. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there, looking up at the window. I couldn't breathe. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at him, but eventually, he turned and walked back to his house without saying a word. The next morning, I called the police. I told them everything, how he'd been watching me, how he seemed to know things about me that I hadn't told him. They sent an officer out to talk to him, but all he had to say was that he was just trying to be friendly. They told me there wasn't much they could do unless he'd actually threatened me. After that, I didn't feel safe in the house anymore. I started looking for a new place, somewhere far away from Jack. I didn't tell anyone I was moving, not even the neighbors. I packed up quietly over the course of a few days, loading boxes into my car at night when no one could see. The last time I saw Jack was the morning I moved out. As I was carrying the last box to my car, he came outside and waved. There was something in his smile that sent a chill down my spine. "I'll miss seeing you around," he said, his voice calm and friendly, like nothing had happened. I didn't respond. I just got in my car and drove away. I never looked back. I was driving late that night, headed back home after visiting my parents. It was a long drive, around 4 hours, and I had left later than I should have. The roads were dark, and I hadn't seen another car in miles. It was the kind of highway that cuts through nothing but fields and trees, and the occasional rundown gas station or diner. I was tired but kept telling myself I could make it home. I'd done this drive plenty of times before, but for some reason, this time felt different. There was this weird sense of unease in the air, like something wasn't quite right. I was about 2 hours away from home when my car started making a strange noise. At first, it was just a slight knocking, nothing too alarming. But within minutes, it got worse, louder, like metal scraping against metal. I slowed down, trying to figure out what was wrong, but then the engine cut out completely. The dashboard lit up with warnings, and before I knew it, the car rolled to a stop on the side of the road. I sat there for a minute, the dark pressing in on all sides. I was in the middle of nowhere. No lights, no houses, no other cars. Just me and my dead car on a deserted road. My phone had barely any signal, one bar flickering on and off. I tried calling roadside assistance, but the call wouldn't go through. Frustrated, I got out of the car, popped the hood, and stared at the engine like I knew what I was looking for. I didn't. I couldn't see anything wrong, but then again, I wasn't a mechanic. I had no clue what had just happened. That's when I heard it, the sound of tires crunching on the gravel behind me. I turned around and saw an old, beat-up truck pulling over. For a split second, I was relieved. Maybe it was someone who could help. A man got out of the truck, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dirty baseball cap pulled low over his face. He walked over to me, his hands in his pockets. "Car trouble?" he asked, his voice low and gruff. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "It just died on me. I don't know what's wrong with it." He didn't say anything right away, just looked me up and down for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Pop the hood. I'll take a look." Something about the way he said it made me feel uneasy. But I was stranded, and he was the only person around. I stepped back as he leaned over the engine, poking around for a few minutes without saying anything. I stood there, watching him, feeling more and more uncomfortable. His hands moved slowly, like he wasn't really trying to fix anything, just pretending to. After a while, he straightened up and wiped his hands on his jeans. "Looks like your alternator's shot," he said, though his tone didn't sound very convincing. "You're not going to be able to drive this anywhere." "Great," I muttered, glancing back at my useless car. "Do you know if there's a mechanic nearby?" He shook his head. "Not this late. Closest one's probably 20 miles back, and they're closed by now." I felt a knot forming in my stomach. "I can call a tow truck in the morning, I guess. I'll just sleep in the car." The man didn't say anything at first, just stared at me, his eyes barely visible under the brim of his cap. "Why don't you come with me?" he said after a long pause. "I can give you a ride. There's a diner a few miles up the road. You can wait there." Something about the way he said it set off alarm bells in my head. It wasn't the words themselves, but the way he said them, like he wasn't really offering, more like he was telling me that's what I was going to do. His eyes never left me, and I could feel the air around us get heavier. I hesitated, trying to think of a way to politely refuse, but before I could say anything, he stepped closer. "It's not safe out here," he said. "Too many things can happen on a road like this." My heart was racing now. "I appreciate the offer, but I think I'll just stay with the car," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The man didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me, his hands still in his pockets. "I insist," he said, his voice colder now. "Come on. It's just a short drive." I took a step back, my mind racing. There was no way I was getting in that truck with him. "No, really, I'm fine," I said, trying to put more distance between us. "I'll be fine here." His face changed then, the friendly offer gone. He took another step toward me, his jaw tightening. "It wasn't a suggestion," he said, his voice low and threatening. I panicked. My eyes darted around, looking for an escape, but there was nothing. Just the empty road and the dark woods on either side. I could feel the blood pounding in my ears as I realized how trapped I was. He was blocking my way back to the car, and I didn't know what he was going to do next. Then, without thinking, I bolted. I ran toward the woods, hoping I could lose him in the trees. I could hear him shouting behind me, but I didn't stop. I just kept running, branches scraping my arms and face as I plunged deeper into the woods. My heart was racing, my breath coming in ragged gasps, but I didn't dare stop or look back. I don't know how long I ran, but eventually, I couldn't hear him anymore. I stopped behind a tree, trying to catch my breath, my whole body trembling. I listened, straining to hear any sound of him following me, but there was nothing. Just the sound of the wind through the trees and my own breathing. I stayed hidden for what felt like hours, afraid to move. Eventually, I crept back toward the road, staying in the shadows of the trees, trying to see if he was still there. His truck was gone. My car was still sitting there, but he was nowhere to be seen. I didn't know what to do. I was too scared to stay, but I had no way to leave. My phone still had no signal, and I wasn't about to start walking down the road, not knowing if he was out there, waiting. I ended up hiding in the woods until morning, too afraid to go back to my car. When the sun finally came up, I walked back to the road. There were more cars now, people on their way to work or wherever they were going. I flagged down a passing car, and the driver was kind enough to give me a ride to the nearest town. I never saw that man again, but I'll never forget the look in his eyes when he told me to get in his truck. I had been talking to him for a couple of weeks before we finally agreed to meet in person. It was through a dating app, and everything seemed normal at first. His profile was decent, he seemed funny, intelligent, and polite. We texted a lot, talked on the phone a couple of times, and I thought, why not meet? He suggested a nice cafe downtown, and I felt comfortable with that. It was a public place, well lit, busy. Seemed safe. When I arrived, I spotted him sitting by the window, looking out at the street. He looked just like his pictures. Tall, clean-shaven, wearing a nice shirt, and he smiled when he saw me. At first, everything was fine. We ordered coffee, talked about the usual stuff, work, hobbies, how terrible dating apps can be. He laughed at my jokes, seemed attentive, even charming. But after maybe an hour, something changed. I couldn't quite put my finger on it at first. It started with little things. He asked me the same question twice, like he hadn't been listening. He kept tapping his fingers on the table, like he was getting impatient or something. I brushed it off as nerves. First dates can be awkward, I figured. But the more time passed, the stranger he got. He started talking faster, jumping from one topic to another. He kept asking weirdly specific questions about where I lived, like how long it would take me to get home or whether my neighborhood was quiet at night. It felt off, but I didn't want to seem rude or paranoid, so I just answered vaguely. But he kept pushing, saying things like, "You should show me your place sometime," and "I bet it's cozy." I laughed it off, but inside, I started feeling uneasy. When I suggested it was getting late and I should head home, he frowned, like he didn't want me to leave yet. He said he'd walk me to my car. I hesitated but thought maybe it was just him trying to be polite. I agreed, thinking it would be a quick walk and then I'd drive off, no big deal. As we walked outside, the air felt heavy. I could feel him walking too close to me, closer than he needed to. He wasn't talking as much now, just glancing over at me every few seconds. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. When we reached my car, I fumbled with my keys, trying to unlock the door as quickly as possible. That's when he said it. "I'll follow you home," he said, like it was a casual offer. I froze for a second. "Oh, no, that's okay," I said, trying to laugh it off. "I'll be fine. It's not far." But he didn't drop it. "It's no trouble," he insisted, stepping a little closer. "I want to make sure you get home safe." I felt my stomach twist. His voice had changed, low and serious. There was something about the way he said it, like it wasn't really a suggestion. I could see it in his eyes, too. He wasn't asking. He was telling me. "No, really," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I'd rather go alone." He just stood there, staring at me, his jaw clenched. "I don't think that's a good idea," he said. "It's late. You shouldn't be out by yourself." Panic was starting to rise in my chest. I didn't know what to do. My mind raced with thoughts. What if he followed me anyway? What if I couldn't shake him? I had to stay calm, had to think fast. I forced a smile. "Actually, I'm meeting up with a friend," I lied, hoping it would throw him off. "She's just a few blocks away." I promised I'd stop by her place, so I won't be going straight home. His expression darkened. "You didn't mention that before." "I must have forgotten," I said quickly, opening my car door. "Thanks for the coffee, but I really need to go." For a moment, he didn't move. He just stared at me, his eyes narrowing like he was trying to figure out if I was lying. Then, without warning, he reached out and grabbed the car door, holding it open. "You're lying," he said, his voice cold now. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I looked around, hoping someone else was nearby, anyone who could help, but the street was empty. It was just me and him. "I'm not lying," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I really need to go. Please let go of the door." He didn't let go. Instead, he leaned in closer, his face inches from mine. "I don't like liars," he said softly, his grip tightening on the door. I panicked. I shoved him hard, pulling the door out of his grip, and jumped into the driver's seat. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hand shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition. He banged on the window, yelling something I couldn't make out. I didn't care what he was saying. I just needed to get out of there. The car roared to life, and I hit the gas, speeding out of the parking lot without looking back. I didn't drive home right away. I was too scared. I drove around for almost an hour, making random turns, checking my rearview mirror constantly, terrified that he might be following me. My phone buzzed a couple of times, texts from him, I assumed, but I didn't dare check them. I just kept driving until I was sure he wasn't behind me. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I felt a wave of relief, but it didn't last long. I still felt like I was being watched, like he could show up at any moment. I ran inside, locked all the doors, and sat by the window, watching the street for any sign of his car. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, my heart pounding in my chest, replaying the night over and over in my head, wondering what would have happened if I hadn't gotten away. The next morning, I blocked his number and deleted the dating app. I told myself it was over, that he wouldn't come looking for me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't safe. For weeks, I kept looking over my shoulder, jumping at every little sound outside my window. Even now, months later, I still check my locks twice before going to bed. I don't know what his plan was, but I know it wasn't good. And I'm just thankful I trusted my gut when I did. I was in France for a work trip. It was my first time there, and I'd spent the day exploring, trying to make the most of my free time before the conference started the next morning. The streets of Paris had been buzzing with tourists, locals, and lights. By the time I finished dinner, it was late. The streets were quieter, and I figured it was best to head back to my hotel. I'd been using public transport all day, but by then I was too tired to figure out the bus or metro schedules. So, I decided to hail a cab. I was staying in a part of the city I wasn't very familiar with, a bit further from the main tourist areas, but I'd gotten there earlier with no problems. I figured it wouldn't take long to get back. I saw a taxi parked at the curb a little ahead of me. The driver was sitting inside, not looking at me as I approached, which felt a little odd, but I thought maybe he was tired too. I walked up to the passenger side and knocked on the window. He glanced up, gave a short nod, and unlocked the doors. I got in, gave him the address of my hotel, and settled in the back seat. At first, everything seemed normal. He didn't speak much, just nodded when I told him where I needed to go. His eyes were on the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel a bit tighter than usual, but I didn't think much of it. I figured he was just concentrating. The streets were pretty empty now, not many cars around. After about 10 minutes, I realized we were going in the wrong direction. I pulled out my phone to check the route, thinking maybe I confused the address or given him the wrong one, but the location was right. The little dot on the map showed we were heading farther away from my hotel, not towards it. "Excuse me," I said, leaning forward a bit. "I think we're going the wrong way." He didn't respond right away, just glanced at me in the rearview mirror for a second before turning his eyes back to the road. "Shortcut," he said in a thick accent. I sat back, feeling uneasy but trying to tell myself he knew the streets better than I did. Maybe he was avoiding traffic or construction. But as we kept driving, the buildings around us started to change. We'd left the busy streets and were now driving through more isolated, run-down areas. Graffiti-covered walls, dark alleyways, and abandoned lots replaced the bright cafes and shops I'd been seeing earlier. My heart began to pound a little faster. I checked my phone again. There was no traffic, no roadblocks. He wasn't taking a shortcut. He was taking me somewhere else. I leaned forward again, this time more firmly. "This isn't right. You're going the wrong way. Take me back to the main road." He ignored me, his hands tightening even more on the steering wheel. His jaw was clenched now, and his eyes looked cold in the mirror. I felt a knot form in my stomach. "Turn around," I said, my voice a bit louder now. I was trying not to panic, but it was getting harder to stay calm. I said, "Take me back." Still, no response. The car kept moving deeper into unfamiliar streets. I started to notice we weren't passing any more cars. There were no pedestrians, no lights in the windows of the buildings we drove by. It was just dark and quiet, and the farther we went, the more I realized there wasn't anyone around who could help if something went wrong. I reached for my phone to call someone, but before I could dial, the driver suddenly swerved the car, pulling onto a narrow side street and stopping the car. The tires screeched as we came to an abrupt halt. I felt my body jerk forward with the force of it. "What the hell?" I shouted, my voice shaking now. He turned around slowly, looking at me for the first time with an expression that sent a chill down my spine. His eyes were dark, almost emotionless, and his mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. He didn't say anything, just stared at me like he was waiting for me to do something. I froze. My mind was racing. I didn't know what he wanted, but I knew I had to get out of there. I reached for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. The doors were locked. I yanked on it harder, panic fully setting in now, but it wouldn't open. I looked up at him again, and he was still staring, his eyes never leaving mine. "Let me out!" I yelled, my voice echoing in the empty street. "Let me out now!" He didn't move. For what felt like an eternity, we just sat there, him watching me struggle with the door, me trying not to completely lose it. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice low and chilling. "You're not going anywhere." I felt a surge of fear like I'd never felt before. I didn't know what he planned to do, but I wasn't going to wait around to find out. I looked around frantically, trying to think of a way to escape. The windows were rolled up, the doors locked, and I was trapped. In a moment of desperation, I lunged forward, trying to grab the door lock on the front passenger side, hoping I could unlock it manually. But before I could reach it, he grabbed my wrist, his grip so tight it hurt. I gasped in pain, trying to pull away, but he wouldn't let go. "Stop!" I shouted, panic rising in my chest. He leaned in closer, his face inches from mine now, and I could feel his breath on my skin. "You're not getting out." My mind was racing. I had to do something, anything. With my free hand, I grabbed my phone from my pocket and swung it at his face, hitting him as hard as I could. He let out a grunt of pain, loosening his grip just enough for me to pull away. I didn't think. I just acted. I threw myself at the door again, this time managing to hit the unlock button before he could stop me. I pushed the door open and stumbled out onto the street, my legs shaky beneath me. I heard him cursing behind me, but I didn't stop. I ran as fast as I could, not caring where I was going, just trying to get as far away from him as possible. My lungs burned, and my heart was pounding in my ears, but I kept running, turning down random streets, hoping to lose him. Eventually, I found myself in a more familiar area, near a busy intersection with people and cars. I slowed down, gasping for breath, and looked behind me. He wasn't there. I had lost him. I flagged down another cab, this time one with a proper company logo on it, and told the driver to take me straight to my hotel. I didn't explain what had happened. I just sat there, shaking, trying to process what I had just escaped from. When I finally made it back to my room, I locked the door and collapsed onto the bed, my mind racing. I didn't sleep at all that night. All I could think about was how close I had come to something terrible happening, and how lucky I was to have gotten out when I did. It started as just another day at the diner. I've been working at this place for over a year now, a small-town diner with regulars who always order the same things. You get used to seeing the same faces, hearing the same conversations. Most of the time, they're friendly. You smile, serve them their coffee, and get on with your day. But there was one man, one regular, who I started to notice more and more. His name was Dave, or at least that's what he said. He'd come in almost every other day, always sitting in the same booth by the window. At first, I didn't think much of it. We get plenty of regulars, and he didn't seem any different. Middle-aged, kind of scruffy looking, wore a faded baseball cap and an old jacket. He was quiet, never causing any trouble, just sitting there for hours nursing a single cup of coffee. Sometimes he'd order pie, but mostly it was just the coffee. It was about a month ago when I started feeling uneasy around him. I couldn't really explain why. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, like he was studying me or something. I'd catch him staring, not in a friendly or casual way, but like he was watching everything I did. His eyes would follow me as I walked around the diner, and when I'd look back at him, he wouldn't look away. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he was just lonely, maybe he was bored. but the feeling wouldn't go away. One night after my shift, I was closing up the diner by myself. It was late, past midnight, and the streets were quiet. Most of the regulars had cleared out long before, but Dave had stayed until closing, like he was waiting for something. I tried not to let it bother me, but when he finally left, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I finished mopping the floors, locked up the register, and grabbed my bag to head out the back door. As soon as I stepped outside, I saw him. Dave was standing there, leaning against the wall just a few feet from the door. My heart jumped into my throat. He hadn't said anything, hadn't made a sound. He was just standing there in the dark, like he was waiting for me. "Oh, hey," I said, trying to act like it didn't freak me out. "Did you forget something inside?" "No," he said, his voice low, almost a mumble. "Just wanted to say good night." "Good night," I replied quickly, already walking toward my car. My hand was shaking as I reached into my bag for my keys. I didn't look back, but I could feel his eyes on me. It was like a weight pressing down on my back. When I got to my car, I locked the doors immediately and drove off without another glance. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the scene over and over, the way he just stood there in the dark, waiting. I tried to convince myself that maybe he was just being friendly, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I didn't say anything to anyone the next day, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. A few days later, I started noticing little things. When I'd leave my apartment in the morning, I'd see his car parked a few blocks away. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but then it kept happening. Every time I left for work, there it was, just sitting there. He never approached me, never said anything, but I could feel his eyes on me, even when I couldn't see him. It got worse after that. One night, after another late shift, I walked out to the parking lot and saw his car parked next to mine. He wasn't in it, but I knew it was his. My hands were shaking as I fumbled with my keys, glancing around the empty lot. I felt exposed, like I was being watched from the shadows. I got into my car as quickly as I could, locking the doors before driving off. The next morning, there was a note stuck under my windshield wiper. It wasn't much, just a scrap of paper with the words, "You're beautiful," written on it. No name, no signature, but I knew who it was from. My stomach turned as I crumpled the note and threw it into the trash. I felt sick, knowing that he was watching me, following me, leaving me notes. It wasn't just some harmless crush. He was tracking me, learning my routine, figuring out where I lived. I told my manager about it, but there wasn't much he could do. "If he's not doing anything illegal, we can't really kick him out," he said. "Just be careful." Careful. What did that even mean? I started looking over my shoulder everywhere I went. Every time I walked to my car, every time I left work, I was on edge. I tried changing my routine, leaving at different times, taking different routes home, but it didn't matter. He always found me. One night, about a week later, it all came to a head. I just finished another closing shift, and as usual, I was the last one out. I locked the diner doors behind me and headed to my car, my heart pounding in my chest. I was scanning the parking lot, looking for his car, but it wasn't there. For the first time in weeks, I felt a small sense of relief. Maybe he'd finally given up. I was halfway to my car when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate footsteps. I froze, my heart racing. I didn't want to turn around, but I forced myself to look. It was Dave. He was standing just a few feet behind me, his face partially hidden by the shadow of his cap. His hands were shoved into his jacket pockets, and he was staring at me with that same unsettling look he'd had in the diner. I felt a chill run down my spine. My keys were in my hand, but my fingers were trembling so much I could barely grip them. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice shaking. He didn't answer. He just stood there, watching me. The silence was suffocating. "Leave me alone," I said, louder this time. "I don't know what you think is going on, but this has to stop." Still, he said nothing. He just took a step closer, his eyes locked on mine. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. I didn't know what he was planning, but I knew I couldn't wait to find out. I turned and ran. I didn't look back, didn't stop to see if he was following me. I just ran as fast as I could to my car, fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I finally managed to unlock the door, throwing myself inside and slamming it shut. I locked the doors and started the engine, my heart racing as I pulled out of the parking lot. As I drove away, I saw him in the rearview mirror, standing in the same spot, just watching me go. He didn't chase after me, didn't try to stop me. He just stood there, staring. I didn't go back to work for a few days after that. I called in sick, too scared to face him again. When I finally did return, I told my manager I wasn't comfortable serving Dave anymore. He agreed to keep an eye on things, but I knew it wouldn't stop him. For weeks, I lived in constant fear, always looking over my shoulder, always expecting to see him lurking somewhere. Eventually, I moved out of my apartment, changed my phone number, and quit my job at the diner. It was the only way I could get away from him. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't run that night, but I'm glad I didn't stick around to find out. I've been jogging the same route for years. Every morning, I wake up around 5:30, lace up my shoes, and head out. It's early enough that the streets are still quiet, only a few people out walking their dogs or grabbing coffee. I always liked it that way. It gave me time to think, to clear my head before the day really started. It was my routine, my little escape. The trail I take runs through a small park near my apartment. It's not a big park, but it's enough. There are trees lining the sides of the path, benches here and there, and a small playground off to the side. Usually, by the time I get there, the sun is just starting to come up, and the park is empty. It's peaceful. Or at least it was. Last Monday, I was out for my usual jog. The air was cool, and the sky was that soft gray you get right before sunrise. Everything was normal, nothing out of the ordinary. I had my headphones in, listening to some podcast I barely paid attention to, just focusing on the rhythm of my steps. I rounded a bend in the trail, and that's when I saw him. He was standing just off the path, half hidden behind one of the trees. At first, I didn't really notice him. It wasn't until I got closer that something felt off. He wasn't just standing there, he was holding something. It took me a second to realize what it was, a camera. He was pointing it right at me. I slowed down a little, trying to make sense of it. He was wearing a dark jacket, the kind that seemed too warm for the cool morning, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could feel him watching me. My stomach twisted. I kept running, trying to act like I didn't notice, but my mind was racing. Who takes pictures of someone running? I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he was just a photographer or something. But it didn't feel right. His whole posture, the way he was angled behind the tree, it was like he was trying to hide. I picked up the pace, trying to shake off the feeling. By the time I reached the end of the park and back onto the street, my heart was pounding, but not from the run. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see him following me. But he wasn't there. I finished my run and tried to convince myself it was nothing, just some weird guy with a camera. The rest of the day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The image of him standing there, the way the camera lens had been pointed directly at me, it stuck in my head. But what was I supposed to do? Call the police? Tell them some guy took a picture of me in the park? It sounded ridiculous. So, I tried to let it go. The next morning, I almost didn't go for my jog. I thought about changing my route, but I didn't want to let some random guy scare me out of my routine. So I went. The park looked the same as always, the trees, the benches, the empty path. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Every time I passed a tree, I found myself glancing at it, expecting to see him there again, but I didn't. I finished my run and went home, telling myself it was all in my head. Then, the next day, I found the photograph. It was slipped under my apartment door, a single black and white photo. At first, I didn't even register what it was. I picked it up, thinking it was some kind of advertisement or a mistake. But when I looked at it, my blood went cold. It was me, running, from the day before. The photo was grainy, but it was clear enough to make out my face, my clothes, even the ponytail bouncing behind me as I ran. I stared at it for what felt like forever, my mind spinning. There was no note, no explanation, just a photo. Someone had taken a picture of me, followed me, and left it at my door. My first thought was to call the police, but what would I say? That someone took my picture and left it for me to find? It wasn't exactly a crime. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how serious it was. Whoever had done this knew where I lived. They knew my routine, where I ran, what time I went out. And now they were leaving photos of me like some kind of sick message. I couldn't stay in the apartment after that. I grabbed my keys and left, not even sure where I was going. I ended up driving around for a while, just trying to clear my head, but the whole time, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every car I passed, every person I saw, I wondered if it was him. Was he following me now? Watching me even as I tried to escape? When I finally went back home, I checked every lock on my door, double and triple checking them, making sure the windows were closed tight. I barely slept that night. Every sound made me jump, every creak of the building settling sent my heart racing. I kept checking the door, expecting to find another photo, another sign that he was out there, watching me. The next morning, I didn't go for my run. I couldn't. The thought of stepping outside, of going back to that park, it made my skin crawl. Instead, I stayed inside, pacing around my apartment, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. No more photos, no knocks on the door, nothing. For the next few days, I stayed in. I even took a few days off work, claiming I was sick. I couldn't focus on anything, couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. But nothing happened. After a week, I started to think maybe it was over. Maybe it had just been some weird prank, or maybe the guy had moved on to someone else. So, I went back to work. I went back to my routine. But I didn't go running anymore. I couldn't. The thought of going back to that park, of seeing him again, it was too much. It was 2 weeks later when I saw him again. I was leaving work late, just after sunset. The street lights were on, and the parking lot was mostly empty. As I walked to my car, I felt that familiar prickling sensation on the back of my neck, like I was being watched. I turned around, and there he was. He was standing across the street, just standing there, staring at me. My heart dropped. It was the same man, the one from the park. He wasn't even trying to hide this time. He was just standing there, watching me. I froze. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. My feet felt glued to the pavement. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. I called the police that night. I told them everything: the man in the park, the photograph, seeing him outside my work. They took a report, but there wasn't much they could do. No crime had been committed, they said. They told me to be careful, to change my routine, to keep an eye out. But that was it. For the next few weeks, I lived in constant fear. I changed my route to work, started parking in different places, but it didn't matter. Every time I thought I was safe, I'd see him again. Standing across the street, sitting in a car down the block, always watching, always waiting. I don't go running anymore. I barely even leave my apartment unless I have to. The police haven't been able to do anything, and the man, whoever he is, hasn't done enough to get arrested. But he's still out there. I was driving cross-country for a new job, and by the time I hit this stretch of highway, it was dark, and I was in the middle of nowhere. The kind of nowhere where the radio cuts out, the trees close in on both sides, and you start counting how many miles you've gone without seeing another car. I'd been driving for hours, and my tank was getting low. I hadn't seen any signs for a gas station, but I knew I couldn't keep pushing it. I kept my eyes peeled for anything: a flickering light, a sign, something. Finally, a small sign for a gas station appeared on the side of the road. I almost missed it because it wasn't well lit, just this rusty old metal thing with an arrow pointing off to the right. It didn't even have a name on it, just the word gas. I hesitated, wondering if I should keep going, but I didn't have much choice. The needle on my fuel gauge was dipping dangerously low, so I turned off the highway and onto this dirt road. The road twisted through some thick trees, and after a couple of minutes, the gas station came into view. It was one of those old, single-pump stations that look like they haven't been updated in 50 years. The kind you see in movies, where you half expect the lights to flicker out as soon as you pull in. There was one pump, and a small building beside it, with dim yellow light glowing from inside. I could barely see inside through the dirty windows. I pulled up to the pump and turned off the engine. The place was dead silent except for the soft hum of insects in the woods nearby. I got out and stretched, the air feeling heavy and a little too still around me. As I reached for the pump, I noticed a guy inside the building watching me. He had his hands on the counter, leaning forward like he'd been waiting for someone to pull in. There was something about him that immediately put me on edge. I couldn't place it at first, but something just didn't sit right with me. I started pumping my gas, hoping I could just fill up and get back on the road without having to go inside. But as I was finishing up, the door to the building creaked open, and the guy stepped out. He was tall, maybe in his mid-40s, with thinning hair and a smile that felt too wide for his face. He had on a dirty, oil-stained shirt and jeans that looked like they hadn't been washed in days. "Evening," he said, his voice slow and drawling, like he had all the time in the world. "Hey," I replied, trying to keep it short. He walked closer, stopping a few feet from me, his hands hanging loose at his sides. "Not too many folks come through here this time of night," he said, still smiling that weird smile. "Where are you headed?" "Just passing through," I said, not giving him more than that. He nodded, looking me up and down like he was sizing me up. "Long way from anywhere out here." "You get lost?" "No," I said, forcing a smile. "Just needed gas." He chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Yeah, well, not many people come out this way unless they're looking for something. I felt a chill run down my spine. The way he said it, like he knew something I didn't, made my skin crawl. I tried to play it off. Just needed a fill up. How much do I owe you? He didn't answer right away, just stood there, staring at me with that same unsettling grin. After what felt like way too long, he finally spoke. You'll need to come inside to pay. I didn't want to go inside. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get back in my car and leave, but I didn't want to make a scene. So, I nodded and walked towards the building, with him trailing a few steps behind me. Inside, the air was stale, and it smelled faintly of oil and something else I couldn't identify. The interior was just as run down as the outside, dusty shelves with a few scattered items, a cooler humming loudly in the corner, and a cash register sitting on a counter that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years. The guy stepped behind the counter and rang me up, his eyes never leaving mine. As I pulled out my wallet, he leaned forward a little, lowering his voice. So, you traveling alone? That question hit me like a punch to the gut. There was no reason for him to ask that, and the way he said it made my heart start racing. I forced a laugh. Just heading to meet some friends, I lied. He nodded, but I could tell he didn't believe me. Long way to be driving all by yourself this late at night. I handed him the cash, not saying anything, just wanting to get out of there. He took it, but instead of ringing it up, he kept looking at me. You sure you know where you're going? A lot of roads out here don't lead anywhere. I nodded, my mouth dry. Yeah, I've got it under control. He smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. Well, you be careful now. Never know who you might run into out there. I didn't respond. I grabbed my change and turned to leave, every nerve in my body screaming at me to get out of there as fast as possible. I could feel his eyes on my back as I pushed open the door and stepped outside. The cool night air hit me, and I hurried back to my car, my heart pounding in my chest. I got in, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I pulled away from the pump, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and that's when I saw it. The guy was standing in the doorway, watching me. But what really made my blood run cold was the truck parked around the side of the building. I hadn't noticed it before, but now I saw it, an old, beat-up pickup, its headlights off, but the engine running. I pulled back onto the dirt road, my hands gripping the steering wheel tight. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that I'd watched too many horror movies. But when I checked the mirror again, the truck had pulled out behind me. It wasn't right on my tail, not yet, but it was there, following me. The road was dark, and the trees on either side made it hard to see much, but I could make out the faint glow of the truck's headlights in the distance, getting closer. I tried to calm myself down, telling myself it was a coincidence. Maybe he was just heading in the same direction. But the longer I drove, the more certain I became that he was following me. I sped up, trying to put some distance between us, but the truck kept pace. I could feel the panic rising in my chest, my thoughts racing. I didn't know where I was. The GPS on my phone had lost signal miles ago, and I hadn't seen another car or sign of civilization since I left the gas station. Up ahead, I saw a turnoff, a narrow side road leading deeper into the woods. I didn't think, I just took it, hoping the truck wouldn't follow. But as soon as I made the turn, I saw the truck's headlights behind me, taking the same road. That was it. I knew then that this wasn't some coincidence. He was following me. And I didn't know why, but I wasn't about to stick around to find out. I floored it, the car bouncing over the uneven dirt road, the trees whipping past me in a blur. The truck was getting closer now, its headlights shining brighter in my rearview mirror. My heart was pounding in my chest, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I had to get away. The road twisted and turned, and I could barely see what was ahead of me. I took a sharp corner too fast, the tires skidding on the loose gravel, and for a moment I thought I was going to lose control. But I managed to keep the car on the road and kept going, pushing the pedal down as hard as I could. But the truck wasn't letting up. It was gaining on me, and I could hear the roar of its engine getting louder. My mind was racing, trying to come up with a plan, but there was nothing. I didn't know where I was. I had no signal, and I couldn't outrun him forever. Just when I thought I couldn't keep going any longer, I saw it, a small, dim light in the distance. It was a house, barely visible through the trees, but it was something. I took the next turn off, heading toward the light, praying that someone would be there, that I wasn't about to make things worse. The truck didn't follow me this time. I glanced in the mirror and saw it stop at the turnoff, its headlights still shining through the trees. But it didn't move. The driver just sat there, watching. I pulled into the driveway of the house, my hands shaking as I fumbled to turn off the engine. I didn't get out right away. I sat there, staring at the truck in the distance, half expecting it to come barreling down the road toward me. But it didn't. After a few minutes, the headlights flickered off, and the truck disappeared back down the road. I sat there for a long time, too shaken to move. When I finally did get out, I went up to the house, knocked on the door, and an older couple answered. They let me in, and I called the police from their phone. They never found the guy or the truck, but I never went back to that part of the country again. I had been looking forward to this weekend for weeks. A chance to escape the city, spend some time in nature, and recharge. I found an adorable little cabin on Airbnb, nestled in the woods, far away from the noise of traffic and people. The picture showed a cozy interior, a fireplace, and the kind of view that promised peace and quiet. I arrived late Friday evening, the sun setting behind the trees as I drove up the gravel path. The cabin looked just like in the pictures, and I felt a rush of excitement as I unloaded my bags. The air was fresh, the only sounds were birds chirping and leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. I took a moment to appreciate the tranquility before heading inside. The first night was perfect. I settled in with a book and some snacks, enjoying the warmth of the fire and the stillness of the woods. As night fell, I turned off the lights, letting the glow of the fireplace fill the room. The silence was comforting. I felt completely at ease, the weight of my work week lifting off my shoulders. But then, in the stillness of the night, I heard something. It was faint at first, a soft noise that sounded like footsteps. I paused, trying to convince myself it was just the wind or maybe an animal outside. The cabin was isolated, after all. I brushed it off and returned to my book. A little while later, I heard it again. This time, it was clearer, a sound of footsteps on the roof. My heart started to race. I put down my book and listened intently, straining to hear. The sound continued, heavy and deliberate. I felt a chill run down my spine. What was someone doing on the roof of my cabin in the middle of the night? I tried to shake it off, thinking maybe it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. I grabbed my phone and sent a quick message to the property owner. I didn't expect much, but I figured it couldn't hurt to ask. I quickly fell asleep, hoping that whatever it was would just go away. The next morning, I woke up feeling uneasy. The noise had stopped, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I decided to go for a hike to clear my mind. I packed a small backpack with some water and snacks and headed out into the woods. The hike helped, and I felt more relaxed by the time I returned to the cabin. I found a message from the property owner waiting for me. He replied, saying he had no idea what I could have heard. No one else should be on the property, he said. I felt a bit foolish for worrying, but the reassurance did little to ease the lingering anxiety. That evening, as darkness fell, I prepared to settle in again. I made a small dinner and turned on some music to drown out the silence. I was determined to enjoy my weekend, despite the strange noise from the night before. As I was cleaning up, I noticed something odd. My jacket, which I had left on the chair, was gone. I shrugged it off, thinking I must have misplaced it. I had a million things on my mind. Later, I decided to take a shower before bed. As I stepped out, I reached for my towel, only to find it missing too. I searched the bathroom and then the cabin, but it was nowhere to be found. Now I was really starting to feel uneasy. I picked up my phone and texted the owner again, asking if he had been there and moved my things. He replied quickly, saying he had not been by and assuring me that no one else should be on the property. That night, I climbed into bed, feeling more alert than I had the previous night. The sounds of the forest surrounded me, but every rustle made me jump. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to calm my racing heart. As I lay there, I heard the footsteps again, this time louder and more pronounced. My heart dropped. It was definitely on the roof. The sound echoed in the quiet of the night, and I felt paralyzed with fear. I wanted to call the owner again, but I didn't want to seem foolish. What if it was just an animal? I picked up my phone and called him instead. He answered on the first ring. "Hello?" His voice was thick with sleep. "Hi," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can hear footsteps on the roof. Is there someone else here?" He sounded confused. "No, ma'am. There should not be anyone else there. I'm not sure what you're hearing." The footsteps continued, louder and more erratic. I could hear them moving back and forth. "I'm really starting to feel uncomfortable," I admitted, my voice trembling. "I understand," he said, his tone shifting slightly. "Just stay inside. Lock the doors, and I'll come by in the morning." I hung up and locked the door, pulling the curtains tight. I sat in the darkness, listening, trying to remain calm. But the noises continued. I could hear scratching now, like something was moving across the roof. I felt my heart pounding in my chest, and I clutched my phone like a lifeline. After what felt like hours, the noise stopped. I finally fell asleep, exhaustion taking over. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight streamed in through the windows, and I felt a little more at ease. I got up, took a shower, and went to the kitchen. That's when I noticed more of my belongings were missing. My phone charger was gone, and so was my favorite sweater. Panic washed over me again. How was this happening? Was someone actually in the cabin? Just then, there was a knock at the door. I jumped, my heart racing again. I approached the door cautiously and peered through the peephole. It was the property owner, standing there with a concerned look on his face. I opened the door. "Thank you for coming," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to tell you about the noises last night and my things are missing." He frowned. "Missing? What do you mean?" I explained, feeling a sense of urgency as I spoke. "I heard footsteps on the roof and now my jacket and charger are gone. I don't understand how this is happening." He listened carefully and then looked past me into the cabin. "Let me take a look around." As he stepped inside, I followed closely behind, anxious. I showed him where I had noticed things missing, and he seemed puzzled. "This doesn't make sense," he said quietly. Then, without warning, he stopped and held up his hand. "Do you hear that?" I listened closely. There it was again, the faint sound of something scratching on the roof. I felt my blood run cold. He moved quickly toward the door, opening it and stepping outside. I followed him, both of us looking up at the roof. The noise continued, and I felt my stomach drop. Suddenly, the owner turned and sprinted toward the side of the cabin, where the trees were thicker. I followed, my heart racing. As we reached the back of the cabin, we spotted a figure of a man, crouched low and trying to hide in the shadows. "Hey," the owner shouted. "What are you doing here?" The man looked up, startled. In that moment, I could see he was holding my missing jacket and phone charger. My breath caught in my throat. The man scrambled to his feet, panic in his eyes. He turned and ran back into the woods. The owner shouted for him to stop, but he was gone in an instant, disappearing into the trees. I stood frozen, heart pounding, feeling a mix of relief and fear. The owner turned to me, his expression serious. "You need to pack your things. We are leaving. Now." I hurried back inside and grabbed what I could. I didn't want to stay another moment. As I was putting my things in the car, I kept looking back at the woods, half expecting him to come back. Once everything was loaded, we drove away from the cabin. I looked in the rearview mirror, watching the trees close in behind me, feeling a sense of dread wash over me. I was grateful to be leaving, but I knew I would never forget that weekend. I was working late again, trying to catch up on some projects that had piled up during the week. It was one of those nights when the office felt way too big, way too quiet. I think I was the only one left on my floor. Everyone else had gone home hours ago. It was nearing 10 p.m., and the hum of the fluorescent lights and the soft tapping of my keyboard were the only sounds keeping me company. The building where I work is an old office tower downtown, and at night, it feels even older. The kind of place where you can hear the pipes creak and the elevator rumble down the hallway, even when no one's using it. It's not creepy exactly, but it gets to you when you're alone. I'd seen the security guard a few times already that night. He's this tall guy, always in the same blue uniform with the building's logo stitched on the chest. His name's Rick. He's been working there for a while now, and we usually just exchange a quick hello when I'm leaving late. He's always been polite, friendly even. But that night, he was different. Around 7 p.m., he came by my office. I was neck deep in spreadsheets and barely looked up when he knocked lightly on the open door. "You still here?" he asked, leaning in the doorway. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. "Lots to do." He nodded, didn't say much. Just kind of lingered there for a second longer than he usually would. I glanced up at him, expecting him to say something else, but he didn't. He just stood there, looking around the room like he was trying to find something. "You're the last one up here, right?" he finally asked, breaking the silence. I shrugged. "I guess. Haven't seen anyone else." He nodded again, a little too slow this time. "Okay. Just making sure. You planning to leave soon?" "Not for a while," I said, giving a small smile. "Still have a lot to finish." His eyes stayed on me for a second longer, then he gave me a quick nod and left. I didn't think much of it at first. Just figured he was doing his rounds. But an hour later, he came by again. This time, he didn't knock. He just kind of appeared at my door, standing there with that same blank look. "Hey," I said, trying not to show that I was startled. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," he said, but there was something off in his voice. "Just checking in." I frowned. "You already did, like an hour ago." He shifted his weight, his hand resting on the doorframe. "I just wanted to make sure you were all right. You know, it's not safe to stay this late. Not a lot of people around." I felt a strange chill run through me, but I brushed it off. He was the security guard, after all. Maybe he was just being overly cautious. "I'll be fine," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Thanks for looking out, though." He didn't move. His eyes were scanning my desk, then the room behind me. I could feel the weight of his stare, and it made my skin prickle. "You sure no one else is here?" he asked suddenly. I blinked. "I mean, I haven't seen anyone." "Why?" "No reason," he said, finally stepping back. "Just checking." He turned and walked away without another word, leaving me sitting there, feeling strangely unsettled. I stared at the open door for a minute, waiting for him to come back, but he didn't. The night dragged on. I tried to focus on my work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Every time I heard the elevator ding or the air conditioning kick on, I'd tense up, half expecting to see Rick standing in my doorway again. Around 9:30, I decided I'd had enough. I packed up my things and shut down my computer, ready to call it a night. As I was slipping on my jacket, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I froze, listening. They were slow, deliberate, heading in my direction. A few seconds later, Rick appeared in my doorway again. This time, he wasn't smiling. "Heading out?" he asked, his voice low. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "I'm done for the night." He nodded slowly, then stepped into the room, walking over to my desk. He was standing too close. Much too close. "You sure you're the last one here?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "I told you, I haven't seen anyone else," I said, feeling my heart race. "Why? Is something going on?" He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned against my desk, his eyes fixed on me, like he was waiting for something. "You know," he said after a long pause, "it's easy to get locked in here overnight. If you're not careful." I stared at him, my pulse pounding in my ears. "What do you mean?" "The doors lock automatically at midnight," he said, still watching me. "Sometimes people forget." I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "I'm leaving now." I grabbed my bag and slung it over my shoulder, moving toward the door. He didn't stop me, but I could feel his eyes on me as I walked past him, my skin crawling with every step. I made it to the elevator and hit the button, praying it would come fast. When the doors finally slid open, I stepped inside, my hand hovering over the closed door button. Just as the doors were about to shut, I saw Rick standing at the end of the hallway, watching me. I didn't breathe until the elevator doors closed completely. The ride down felt like it took forever. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Was I overreacting? Or was there something seriously wrong with him? When the elevator finally reached the lobby, I practically ran out of the building. The cold night air hit me, and I let out a shaky breath. My car was parked just a few blocks away, and I didn't stop walking until I was inside, doors locked. I sat there for a minute, just trying to calm down, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I glanced back at the building, half expecting to see Rick standing there, but the entrance was empty. I don't know what he was planning, or if he was planning anything at all. But I didn't stay late at the office again after that. And I haven't seen Rick since. It was late, probably around 11 p.m., and I was sitting on my couch watching some show on Netflix. I hadn't eaten much that day, so I decided to order some takeout. It wasn't unusual for me to order food late at night, especially on days where work kept me too busy to cook or even think about dinner until everything was quiet. That night, I decided to go with Chinese. There's a place a couple of blocks away that delivers fast, and I'd used them before without any issues. I ordered online like I always did, keeping it simple. Fried rice, some dumplings, and a soda. As soon as I placed the order, I went back to the show, not really thinking about it. The app said it'd be about 30 minutes, which was fine by me. I could get through an episode before the food got here. About 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from the delivery driver, letting me know he was nearby. I glanced at my phone, didn't think much of it, and got up to wait by the door. It's a habit I've gotten into, waiting by the door when the food's on its way so I don't keep the driver waiting. I heard a knock a few minutes later. When I opened the door, I noticed the guy was already smiling in this strange way, like he knew me or something. It caught me off guard because most delivery people don't really make much small talk. They hand you the food, you thank them, and that's it. But this guy, he didn't just hand me the bags. He sort of stepped forward, into the doorway, holding the bags like he wasn't sure what to do next. "Hey there," he said, and his voice had this weird, too friendly tone. "I've got your order." "Yeah, thanks," I said, reaching for the bags. I expected him to just hand them over and leave. But he didn't. Instead, he kept holding the bags, still smiling like I was an old friend. "Let me help you with these," he said, and he stepped forward like he was about to come inside. I froze for a second, not really sure how to react. I'd never had a delivery person offer to come in before. I mean, it wasn't like I'd ordered enough food to need help. Just 2 bags. "It's okay," I said quickly, trying to sound polite. "I've got it." But he didn't move. He just stood there, blocking the door, still holding the bags. His smile didn't change. "Are you sure?" he asked, glancing behind me like he was trying to see into the apartment. "It's no trouble, really. I can bring them in for you." At that point, I was starting to feel uncomfortable. Something about the way he was standing there, the way he kept trying to look inside, made me nervous. I tried to stay calm, keep things casual. "No, really, it's fine," I said, and I reached out again to take the bags from him. This time, he let go, but he didn't step back right away. He just stood there, still smiling, still looking at me in that weird, too friendly way. "Well, all right," he said after a long pause. "If you're sure." I nodded quickly, already backing up a step. "Yeah, I'm sure. Thanks." He finally turned to leave, but not before giving me one last look over his shoulder. "You have a good night," he said, his tone strange, like he was leaving out some unspoken part of the sentence. I closed the door as soon as he was gone, locking it and double-checking the bolt. My heart was racing, and I didn't really know why. It wasn't like he'd done anything overtly threatening, but something about the whole interaction left me on edge. I brushed it off, though, convincing myself I was overreacting. Maybe he was just trying to be nice. People can be awkward sometimes, and I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. So I put the food on the table, sat down to eat, and tried to forget about it. The next night, around the same time, I was getting ready for bed. I'd already brushed my teeth and was scrolling through my phone, trying to unwind. That's when I heard a knock at the door. I froze, phone still in my hand, staring at the door like it might move on its own. It was late, almost midnight by then, and I wasn't expecting anyone. I waited, hoping whoever it was would go away. But then the knock came again. Slow. Deliberate. I got up, my heart pounding, and tiptoed to the door. I peered through the peephole, half expecting to see some drunk neighbor or a lost delivery person at the wrong apartment. But it was him. The same delivery guy from the night before, standing there in the hallway, staring at my door like he was waiting for me to open it. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, watching him through the peephole, my mind racing. Why was he back? I hadn't ordered anything. There was no reason for him to be here. He knocked again, 3 slow knocks. Then, after a long minute, he stepped back, looking up and down the hallway like he was checking to see if anyone else was around. Finally, he turned and walked away, disappearing down the stairwell at the end of the hall. I stayed by the door for a long time, too scared to move. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to call someone, but what would I even say? That a delivery guy had come back to my apartment for no reason? It didn't sound like much of an emergency, but the fear in my gut told me otherwise. The next day, I was on edge the entire time. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I kept checking my phone, half expecting another message from the delivery app, but nothing came. The day dragged on, and by the time I got home, I was exhausted, both mentally and physically. I didn't plan on ordering anything that night. I had leftovers from the night before, so I figured I'd just heat those up and call it a night. But as soon as the sun went down, that same sense of unease settled over me again. I made sure the door was locked, checked the windows, even pulled the blinds down just to feel a little safer. I was sitting on the couch, trying to distract myself with TV, when my phone buzzed. It was a text. From the delivery guy. "Hey, just wanted to check if you needed anything tonight. I can swing by if you're hungry." My stomach dropped. How did he even have my number? I hadn't given it to him, it must have come from the delivery app. But why was he texting me directly? That wasn't normal. I didn't reply. I deleted the message and blocked the number, trying to convince myself that it would stop there. But it didn't. An hour later, there was another knock at the door. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was. My hands were shaking as I stood there, my heart pounding in my ears. I didn't open the door. I didn't even move. I just stood there, listening to the slow, deliberate knocks. After what felt like forever, the knocking stopped. But I didn't feel any relief. I knew, somehow, that he'd be back. The next few nights were the same. He'd show up late, knocking on my door, sending me texts from different numbers, asking if I needed anything, if I wanted him to come by. I stopped answering the door altogether, stopped replying to the messages, but he didn't stop coming. I filed a complaint with the delivery app, but they told me they couldn't do anything without proof. I even called the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do unless he actually did something. So now, every night, I sit here, waiting for the knock, waiting for him to come back, because I know he will. I rented this cabin to get away for the weekend. Just a couple of days, nothing fancy, just some peace and quiet. It's one of those small places deep in the woods, far enough from everything but not too remote. I found it online, one of those rentals people put up, no real hotels or anything. Figured I'd get some fresh air, do some reading, and not deal with anyone for a couple of days. That was the plan, anyway. The cabin itself wasn't anything special. It had one main room with a little kitchen, a small bedroom, and a bathroom. There was a porch out front, nothing behind it but more woods. There were some old chairs out there, probably hadn't been used in a while. It was late fall, and the air was starting to get that chill to it, but I didn't mind. I liked the cold, and I had packed enough to stay warm. The first day was pretty uneventful. I got there, unpacked, and took a short walk around the property. The woods around the cabin were thick but not too dense to walk through. I didn't see any other cabins nearby, which was part of the reason I picked this place. It was quiet. No neighbors, no cars, no noise, just the wind in the trees and the occasional sound of animals rustling through the underbrush. I spent most of the evening inside, cooking a simple meal and reading by the fireplace. The place didn't have a TV or much in the way of entertainment, but that was fine with me. I wanted to disconnect. It got dark fast, as it does in the woods, and the only light was from the fire and the single lamp on the table. I liked the isolation. Sometime after midnight, I decided to go to bed. I shut everything off, leaving just a little nightlight in the hallway between the main room and the bedroom. The wind outside had picked up, and I could hear it howling through the trees. It was that kind of wind that makes the branches scrape against the windows, and the whole cabin seemed to creak every now and then. But I was used to that kind of thing, nothing unusual for an old cabin in the woods. It must have been around 2 a.m. when I woke up to a sound. At first, I thought it was just the wind again, maybe a branch hitting the cabin. But then I heard it again, 3 distinct knocks. Slow, deliberate. I sat up in bed, trying to shake off the grogginess, my heart already starting to race a little. I waited, listening. Knock. 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 It was coming from the front door. There shouldn't have been anyone out here. I hadn't seen any signs of people all day, and the cabin wasn't near any main roads or hiking trails. My first thought was maybe it was an animal, something banging against the door. But the knocks were too precise. It was like someone was actually standing out there, knocking to be let in. I got out of bed slowly, trying not to make any noise. I didn't turn on the lights, just moved quietly toward the door, my heart pounding harder with every step. I didn't know what I was expecting to see, but the last thing I wanted was to open the door and find someone standing there in the middle of the night. When I reached the door, I paused. There was no peephole, no window to look through. I just stood there, my hand hovering over the doorknob, listening. The wind had died down, and it was almost too quiet now, except for my own breathing. I stood there for what felt like minutes, waiting for another knock, but nothing happened. Eventually, I worked up the nerve to open the door. I turned the knob slowly, pulling the door open just a crack, enough to peek out. There was no one there. The porch was empty. The woods beyond were still and dark. I stepped outside, my breath visible in the cold air, and looked around. Nothing. No signs of anyone. Just the trees and the night. I checked around the side of the cabin, even went around back, but it was the same. Empty. I went back inside, locking the door behind me and trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled in my chest. Maybe it had been my imagination, or maybe some animal had knocked something over outside. I told myself it was nothing and went back to bed, but I didn't sleep well after that. Every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind had me on edge. When morning came, I felt a little better. The daylight helped chase away the lingering fear from the night before. I figured I'd go outside, take another look around, and maybe get some fresh air. But as soon as I stepped out onto the porch, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There were footprints. In the dirt, right under the porch, clear as day. They weren't mine. I hadn't been out there since yesterday afternoon, and these prints were fresh. They led right up to the edge of the porch, then stopped. I knelt down, trying to get a closer look, and that's when I saw it. There were signs that someone had been lying there. The dirt was disturbed, like someone had been curled up under the porch, hidden from view. It was sheltered under there, dry and out of the wind, but I hadn't thought to check that spot last night. Whoever had knocked on my door must have been hiding right there the whole time, watching, waiting. My skin crawled at the thought of it. Someone had been right under me while I was standing on the porch, completely unaware. They could have grabbed me, or worse, and I wouldn't have even seen it coming. I stood up quickly, scanning the woods around me. The footprints didn't lead away from the cabin. They just stopped under the porch, like whoever had been there had either disappeared into thin air or was still out there, watching. I went back inside, locking the door again, and started packing up my things. I wasn't going to stick around to find out who had been out there or why they'd been knocking on my door in the middle of the night. Whatever reason they had, I didn't want any part of it. I left the cabin a couple of hours later, driving out of there as fast as I could. I haven't been back since, and I don't plan on it. I still don't know who was out there or what they wanted, but the thought of someone lying under the porch while I was standing just feet above them still makes my skin crawl. It started off normal. Too normal, actually, that when things got weird, I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner. You'd think I would have picked up on it after a while, but I didn't. At least not right away. His name was Jake. We worked in the same office for a couple of years, but I never really paid him much attention before all this started. He was always just kind of there. Polite, friendly. Nothing that stood out in any way. I don't know. I guess that's why when he started talking to me more, I didn't think anything of it. It wasn't until last winter when we got stuck working on the same project. We had to stay late a few nights, and he was helpful, easy to work with. It was nice having someone who didn't make the whole thing more stressful than it already was. We talked a bit during those nights about work, life, nothing deep. He mentioned being single, and I told him I was too. Looking back, that probably was a mistake, but it didn't seem like it then. He didn't make a move or anything. He just listened. After that, he started stopping by my desk more often. Nothing crazy at first, just checking in, small talk, asking if I wanted coffee when he went on breaks. Stuff like that. I didn't mind. I even thought it was nice. Everyone at work mostly kept to themselves, so having someone to chat with was kind of refreshing. Then he asked me if I wanted to grab dinner sometime. I hesitated. Not because I didn't like him, but because I wasn't sure if I wanted to blur those lines. We worked together. But I didn't want to be rude, so I agreed, thinking it was just dinner. It wasn't a date or anything. And the dinner itself was fine. We talked, laughed a little. He was still the same polite, friendly guy. Nothing off. Then, at the end of the night, he asked if I wanted to do it again sometime. I wasn't sure how to respond. I didn't feel the same way about him. I liked him as a coworker, maybe a friend, but nothing more. So, I said, I think we're better off as friends. He smiled. It didn't seem forced or upset. Yeah, of course, he said. I get it. And that was that. At least, I thought it was. A few days later, I noticed something odd. It was subtle, but when I came back from lunch, there was an email in my work inbox. The subject line said, "Just saying hi." It was from a random address, not one I recognized. The email itself was short, just 2 sentences. I see you. You're not as hidden as you think you are. I stared at it for a while, confused. At first, I thought it was spam. Maybe a phishing email or some junk. But there was no link, no attachments. Just those 2 sentences. I ignored it, deleted it, and moved on with my day. A couple of days later, another email came in. This time, the subject line read, "You should be careful." The message was longer. "People like you don't realize how easy it is to get close. You never know who's watching. Maybe you should watch your back more carefully." That one gave me chills. It felt targeted, personal. I told myself it was just some troll, someone messing with me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I went back and checked the address again. Still no name. I figured it was just a sick prank or someone bored. Then, that Friday, I got another one. This one was worse. The subject line just said, "You're next." The email was simple, "I know where you live." I sat there, staring at the screen, my heart racing. That was too far. Whoever was sending these emails was crossing a line. I started to panic, thinking back on everyone I'd interacted with recently. I couldn't think of anyone who'd want to mess with me like this. But then I thought about Jake. It hit me like a punch to the stomach. I didn't want to believe it at first. He'd been nothing but kind. Why would he do something like this? But the timing, it was too close. He'd been nothing but normal, but ever since I turned him down for dinner, things started getting strange. The emails came not long after. And the tone, it felt like someone who was angry, but trying to hide it. I tried to brush it off again, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. I started avoiding him at work, which wasn't hard at first. But then he started showing up at my desk again. Casual, like nothing had happened. Asking if I wanted to grab lunch or if I needed help with anything. His smile never left his face, but every time I saw him, my skin crawled. I felt trapped, unsure of what to do. One day, I decided to confront him indirectly. I asked him, out of the blue, if he'd ever gotten strange emails before, like spam or something threatening. He paused for a second, just a second, and then shook his head. "Nope, nothing like that," he said, and I could swear his smile flickered for a moment. After that, the emails got worse. More frequent. Some had pictures of my apartment building attached. Grainy, like they were taken from far away, but close enough that I knew it was my place. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. Reporting it to work felt like too much. If I was wrong, if it wasn't him, I'd ruin everything. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me, waiting for me to crack. One night, I was leaving the office late, and I saw him standing in the parking lot. He wasn't near his car. He was just standing there, watching me. His face was blank, no smile this time. I kept my head down and hurried to my car, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. As I pulled out of the lot, I looked in the rearview mirror, and he was still standing there, staring after me. That was when I knew I had to do something. The next morning, I went to HR. I didn't have solid proof, just my gut and the emails. They said they'd look into it, but I could tell they weren't taking it seriously. To them, Jake was just a nice guy, maybe a little overly friendly, but harmless. After that, he started showing up outside of work. I'd see him on my street, walking casually like it was just a coincidence. But I knew it wasn't. He was everywhere. At the grocery store, at the coffee shop I always went to. Always smiling, always acting like it was just chance. The emails kept coming, more threatening each time. I finally went to the police. They said they'd investigate, but without any real evidence, there wasn't much they could do. They told me to keep a record of the emails, to be careful. One night, I came home late again. As I unlocked my door, I noticed something on the ground in front of it. It was a single rose, fresh and bright red. No note, no explanation. just a flower, lying there like a warning. I didn't sleep that night. I kept my lights on, every door locked, every window checked twice. I was too scared to leave, but too scared to stay. Eventually, I quit my job. I couldn't take it anymore. I moved to a different part of the city, changed my number, blocked the email addresses. The email stopped, and for a while, I thought it was over. But then, a few months later, I saw him again. Just walking down the street, smiling that same smile. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I knew what that smile meant. I don't know what he wants, or why he hasn't done anything yet. But he's still out there, watching. I was never the type to scare easy. Lived in this house for almost 8 years now, quiet neighborhood, friendly enough people. Nothing out of the ordinary, just the usual suburban stuff. It's a bit isolated, sure, but I like the space. The peace. No weirdos hanging around, no drama, just me and my house. That all changed about a month ago. I don't know how else to explain it except that it was the kind of thing that sneaks up on you. One night, I woke up around 2:30 in the morning. I'm not a light sleeper, but something pulled me out of sleep. It wasn't a loud noise or anything that would normally wake me. It was like a feeling more than anything else, a kind of pressure in the air, if that makes sense. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, and listened. At first, I didn't hear anything, just the usual hum of the fridge downstairs, maybe the wind outside. Then, there it was, this soft sound, like someone moving around outside, like shuffling footsteps. It wasn't loud, but it was distinct. I thought maybe it was an animal. I get raccoons around here sometimes, maybe even a deer, so I tried to brush it off. But the noise didn't stop. It wasn't random scuffling like an animal would make. It sounded deliberate. Like someone walking around out there, trying to be quiet. I got out of bed and moved toward the window. I pulled the curtain back just a bit, careful not to make any noise myself. The yard was dark, lit only by the small porch light that I always leave on. I scanned the area but didn't see anything at first. No movement. Then I heard it again, this time from the side of the house. My stomach tightened. It wasn't my imagination. Someone was definitely out there. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I felt stupid doing it, but the sound of those footsteps didn't sit right with me. As I waited for the operator, I kept looking out the window, expecting to see someone at any moment. When they answered, I told them someone was outside my house, moving around. They said they'd send a patrol car to check it out. By the time the cops showed up, the noises had stopped. I watched them walk around the yard, flashlights sweeping through the bushes and around the side of the house. After about 15 minutes, one of the officers came up to the door. He told me they didn't see anything, no signs of anyone, no tracks in the yard. He asked if I'd maybe heard an animal. I almost wanted to agree with him, to brush it off as nothing, but I knew what I heard. Still, there wasn't much they could do. They told me to call again if I heard anything else. I nodded, thanked them, and watched as they drove away, the unease sitting heavy in my chest. The next few nights were quiet. I almost convinced myself it really had been nothing, just my imagination getting the best of me in the middle of the night. Maybe I was stressed. Maybe I just misheard something. But then it happened again. This time, it was closer to 3 a.m. The same sound woke me, that soft, careful shuffle of footsteps outside. My heart pounded as I listened. It was the same deliberate pace as before, like someone was trying to move without being heard but failing just enough to make their presence known. I got up and went to the window again, but this time, I didn't just hear the footsteps. I saw someone. There, standing just outside the circle of light from the porch, was a man. He wasn't moving. He just stood there, facing the house. I couldn't see his face clearly, his head was down, like he was looking at the ground. But I could see enough to know that he wasn't supposed to be there. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket, his hands in his pockets. I froze. I didn't know what to do. My phone was on the nightstand, but I didn't want to move too quickly, didn't want to make any noise that might let him know I was watching. I stood there, barely breathing, waiting for him to move, to do something. But he just stayed still, like he was waiting too. After what felt like forever, he finally lifted his head. I couldn't make out his features in the dark, but I knew he was looking directly at me. I ducked behind the curtain, heart racing, my hands shaking as I grabbed my phone. I called 911 again, my voice barely a whisper as I told them there was someone in my yard, watching me. This time, the cops arrived faster. I didn't go back to the window. I stayed in the corner of the room, listening, trying to calm myself down. When the officers knocked on the door, I jumped. They told me they'd check the yard again, but there was no one there. No tracks. No sign that anyone had been standing where I'd seen him. I felt sick. How could they not see him? I saw him. He was right there, standing in my yard, looking at my house. They asked if I wanted them to stay for a bit, but I shook my head. What could they do? If they hadn't seen him, they'd probably just think I was losing it. They told me to call if it happened again and left. After that night, I couldn't sleep properly. Every sound, every creak, every gust of wind put me on edge. I started locking all the windows, double-checking the doors. I even installed a couple of security cameras around the house, hoping that if this guy showed up again, I'd at least have proof. A few nights went by, and nothing happened. I started to relax, thinking maybe he wasn't coming back. Maybe he'd just been some random creep passing through. But then, one night, around the same time as before, the motion sensor light outside flicked on. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera app, pulling up the live feed from the camera facing the front yard. At first, the screen showed nothing but the empty yard, the bushes swaying slightly in the wind. Then, from the corner of the screen, he appeared. The same man. He was walking slowly, methodically, toward the house. He stopped just at the edge of the porch light, his face still hidden by the shadows. My blood turned to ice. He was back. And he knew where the cameras were. He stayed just far enough away that I couldn't see his face clearly. I didn't call the police this time. What were they going to do? They hadn't believed me the first 2 times. Instead, I watched him, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. He stood there for what felt like hours, but it was probably only a few minutes. Then, just like before, he turned and walked off into the dark, disappearing from the camera's view. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the lights on, sat up in bed, watching the camera feed over and over, replaying the footage. I knew he was coming back, and the worst part was that I didn't know why. What did he want? Why my house? Why me? It's been a few weeks since the last time I saw him. I haven't heard any more noises, and the cameras haven't picked him up again. But I know he's still out there. Waiting. Watching. I've thought about moving, but part of me is afraid that even if I do, he'll follow. He knows where I live. He's been in my yard. He's watched me. I don't know what he's waiting for, but I can't shake the feeling that one night, he'll do more than just stand there. When I started college, I was excited about having a roommate. I'd never lived away from home before, so it felt like an adventure. Sharing a space with someone new seemed fun, and I thought it would make the transition easier. Her name was Lydia, and when we first met during move-in day, she seemed nice enough, quiet, kept to herself. She had long black hair that she rarely brushed, and she didn't talk much, but that didn't bother me. We weren't instant best friends or anything, but I figured we'd get along just fine. The first couple of weeks were pretty normal. She didn't say much, but I chalked that up to her being shy. She spent a lot of time in our room, sitting at her desk, staring at her laptop. She didn't have many friends that I could tell, but I didn't think much of it. I was busy with classes, making friends, and adjusting to college life. Lydia never went to any of the social events or parties that everyone else was excited about, but I figured that wasn't her thing, and I didn't push her to come along. Then things started getting weird. I don't know exactly when it changed, but at some point, Lydia's behavior shifted. At first, it was little things. I'd come back to the room, and she'd be standing in the middle of it, just staring at nothing. Or I'd wake up in the middle of the night, and she'd be sitting on her bed, her eyes wide open, like she hadn't blinked in hours. She wouldn't move, wouldn't respond if I asked her if she was okay. She'd just sit there, silent. One night, I came back from studying at the library late. When I opened the door, Lydia was standing by her desk, her back to me. She didn't move when I walked in, and when I called her name, she didn't turn around. I figured she hadn't heard me, so I set my bag down and headed to the bathroom. When I came back out, she was still standing there, staring down at something on her desk. It was a knife. Not a kitchen knife, not something you'd use for cutting food. This was a small, sharp knife, the kind people carry for self-defense. I froze when I saw it, but before I could say anything, she turned around, holding it in her hand. She looked at me, her eyes wide, her grip tight on the handle. "Lydia?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't answer. She just stood there, holding the knife, staring at me like she didn't recognize me. "Are you okay?" I tried again, feeling my heart race. After what felt like forever, she slowly put the knife down on her desk. Without saying a word, she climbed into bed, turned off the light, and pulled the covers over herself. It was like nothing had happened. I stood there, staring at her for a few minutes, trying to process what I'd just seen. I didn't know what to do. I mean, it wasn't illegal to have a knife, right? Maybe she just had it for protection or something, even though it felt off. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. After that, things got worse. She started acting more erratic, more aggressive. If I left my things on her side of the room by accident, she'd snap at me. She'd throw my stuff back onto my bed without saying anything, but the look in her eyes scared me. It was like she hated me for no reason. I tried to talk to her, to ask if everything was okay, but she would just stare at me like I was speaking a different language. The worst part was the night I woke up and found her standing over my bed. It was maybe 3 a.m., and I'd been in a deep sleep. When I opened my eyes, there she was, standing at the foot of my bed, her face pale in the dim light coming through the window. My heart jumped into my throat, and I was frozen for a moment, not understanding what was happening. She was holding something in her hand. It took a second for me to realize it was the same knife I'd seen on her desk weeks ago. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My mouth went dry, and I couldn't even move. I just lay there, staring up at her, waiting for her to do something. She didn't say a word. She just stood there, her hand gripping the knife so tightly her knuckles were white. She was breathing heavily, her eyes wide and focused on me. "Lydia?" My voice came out in a whisper, barely audible. "What are you doing?" She didn't answer. She didn't blink. She just stood there, staring at me, her chest rising and falling like she was out of breath. I tried to sit up slowly, not wanting to startle her. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do. I didn't know if I should make a run for it, try to grab the knife, or just stay still and hope she wouldn't do anything. But every move I made felt like it could set her off. "Please put the knife down," I said, my voice shaking. "We can talk, okay?" She finally spoke, but her voice was strange, low and cold, like it wasn't even her speaking. "You don't belong here," she said. My blood ran cold. I didn't know what she meant, but the way she said it terrified me. "Lydia, you're scaring me," I whispered. For a second, I thought she might actually listen to me. Her grip on the knife loosened, and she took a step back. But then, just as quickly, her expression changed, her eyes narrowing. She raised the knife slightly, and my heart stopped. I knew I had to do something, fast. I didn't think, I just acted. I jumped out of bed, grabbing the blanket and throwing it over her. She screamed, but I didn't stop. I pushed past her, sprinting for the door, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I ran out of the room, down the hall, not even caring that I was barefoot and still in my pajamas. I didn't stop running until I reached the front desk of our dorm. The night attendant looked at me like I was crazy, but I didn't care. I told her what had happened, that Lydia had a knife, that she'd been standing over my bed. The police were called, and they came to check it out. When they searched our room, they found the knife under Lydia's pillow. She was taken away that night. I never saw her again. I don't know what happened to her, or why she acted the way she did. I've heard rumors that she had some kind of breakdown, that she'd been dealing with a lot of mental health issues, but no one really knows for sure. The school never told me much. They offered me a new room, which I took without hesitation. It's been a few months since that night, but I still think about it all the time. I can't sleep without locking my door, even though I know I'm safe. Sometimes, I wake up in the middle of the night, expecting to see someone standing at the foot of my bed again. I've tried to move on, but it's hard. The thought that someone could be so close to hurting you, without you even realizing it, keeps me up at night. I've been talking to this girl online for about a month. Her name was Megan, or at least that's what she told me. We met on one of those dating apps where you chat for a while before deciding to meet up. It wasn't anything serious at first, just casual conversations about work, life, that sort of thing. Over time, we started messaging more often, and eventually, she suggested we meet in person. It felt right, you know? I wasn't rushing into it, and neither was she. We picked a spot in a small park downtown, near a cafe where we could grab a coffee if we hit it off. It was broad daylight, public place, nothing to worry about. I thought it was the perfect spot. When the day came, I was excited but also a bit nervous, like anyone would be. I got to the park a little early, sat down on a bench near the fountain where we agreed to meet, and waited. I kept checking my phone, expecting a message from her saying she was on her way or running late, but nothing came. After about 10 minutes of waiting, I started to feel a little stupid. Maybe she bailed. Maybe I'd been catfished. Who knows? I was just about to give up and head home when a guy approached me. He looked a little rough, messy hair, scruffy beard, wearing a hoodie even though it was warm out. He walked right up to me, like he knew me, which put me on edge immediately. "Hey, are you waiting for someone?" he asked, a weird grin on his face. I hesitated for a second, unsure whether I should answer. "Yeah, I'm supposed to meet someone here." The guy nodded, like he already knew. "You meeting Megan?" That caught me off guard. I hadn't told anyone where I was going or who I was meeting. My heart started racing a little, but I tried to stay calm. "Yeah, how do you know her?" He smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was something off about it. "She told me about you." I didn't like that answer. My gut was telling me something was wrong, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. "She's supposed to be here by now." "You seen her?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he sat down on the bench next to me, too close for comfort. "You and Megan been talking for a while, huh? She seems to really like you." I scooted over a little, putting some space between us. "Yeah, we've been chatting online. But she didn't mention you." The guy leaned back, stretching his arms across the back of the bench like we were old friends. "I'm a friend of hers. She told me she was meeting you today." My skin started crawling. There was something about the way he was acting, so casual, like he knew more about me than he should. It was unsettling, and my instincts were screaming at me to get out of there, but I didn't want to be rude. "Where is she then?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He shrugged. "She'll be here. She wanted me to come talk to you first, though. You know, just to make sure you're cool." That was when it clicked. This was a setup. There was no Megan. Or if there was, she wasn't coming. This guy had been waiting for me, watching me, and now he was here for some reason that had nothing to do with her. I stood up, pretending like I wasn't freaked out. "I think I'm just gonna head out. If she shows up, tell her I had to leave." But he didn't move. He just sat there, looking up at me with that creepy smile still plastered on his face. "You sure you want to leave? Megan's been looking forward to meeting you. She talked a lot about you." I didn't say anything. I turned and started walking away, fast, not running but close to it. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. I could feel his eyes on me the whole time, and my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I didn't get far before I heard footsteps behind me. "Hey," he called out, his voice louder now. "Where you going, man? We're just getting to know each other." I ignored him, walking faster. The park wasn't crowded, but there were still a few people around. I thought if I could get closer to them, I'd be safer, but the footsteps behind me were getting closer. I finally glanced over my shoulder, and he was following me, his hands shoved in his pockets, walking with this weird casual stride, like he had all the time in the world. My stomach dropped. I didn't know what he wanted, but I wasn't sticking around to find out. I sped up, practically jogging now, heading for the entrance of the park. I could see the street up ahead, cars passing by, people walking along the sidewalk. If I could just make it there, I'd be fine. But then I felt a hand grab my arm. "Hold on a second," the guy said, his voice low and threatening. "I just want to talk." I yanked my arm free, panic shooting through me. "Get the hell away from me." He didn't stop. He just kept coming, his grin gone now, replaced by something much darker. "Why are you running?" We were having a nice conversation. I didn't say anything. I just ran. I didn't care if it looked crazy. I didn't care if people stared. I sprinted toward the street, my legs burning, my heart racing. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps pounding the pavement, but I didn't look back. I burst out of the park and onto the sidewalk, nearly running into a couple walking by. I didn't stop. I just kept running until I reached the nearest store and ducked inside. It was a small convenience store, the kind with a clerk behind the counter and shelves packed with snacks and drinks. I ran to the back, trying to catch my breath, my whole body trembling. The clerk looked at me like I was crazy, but I didn't care. I stood there, staring at the door, waiting for the guy to come in after me. But he didn't. Minutes passed, and he never showed. I stayed in that store for a long time, long enough for my heart rate to come down and my breathing to return to normal. Eventually, I called a cab and went home. I didn't walk back through that park. I didn't want to risk it. When I got home, I deleted the app and blocked Megan's number. I didn't know if she was real, or if she was in on it, or if the guy had been lying about everything. It didn't matter. I wasn't going to find out. For days after that, I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see the guy following me again. But he never showed up. I don't know what he wanted from me, what he was planning, but I'm glad I never found out. We'd been hiking since early that morning, following one of the longer trails up near the mountains. It was me and my friend Daniel, someone I've known since high school. We'd done these hikes before, usually just day trips, packing enough to make it back before sunset. It was never anything serious, but that day, we decided to take one of the less traveled routes, a trail that was supposed to be more secluded. The weather was perfect for it. Warm but not too hot, clear skies, a little breeze coming off the hills. The kind of day you feel like nothing can go wrong. We had our backpacks loaded with water, snacks, and a map, even though we both knew the area pretty well. The trail wasn't marked much, but we weren't worried. The plan was to hike a few hours, stop for lunch, then head back down before dark. Simple. Around midday, we reached a clearing where we decided to take a break. It was one of those spots that feels like it's been untouched for years, no other hikers, no signs of people passing through recently. We sat there for a while, eating and talking about nothing in particular, just enjoying the quiet. After a bit, I told Daniel I was going to find a spot to pee. He nodded, staying put with his backpack on the ground, flipping through the map for a second. It wasn't a big deal. I wasn't going far, just into the trees nearby to get some privacy. I walked off the trail for maybe a minute or two, just enough to get out of sight. When I came back, Daniel was gone. At first, I didn't think anything of it. He probably went off to find a place himself or maybe stretch his legs. I called his name, figuring he'd hear me and shout back, but there was no answer. It didn't seem strange at the time. I assumed he'd be back soon, so I just sat down, waiting. After about 10 minutes, I started to feel uneasy. I stood up and looked around, walking back and forth along the trail, calling his name louder. The forest was still quiet. Too quiet. I didn't hear any footsteps, no rustling of leaves, nothing but the wind. It felt wrong, like the whole place had gone still in a way it wasn't supposed to. I kept walking, calling out for him, thinking maybe he'd gone up ahead or wandered off a bit. I checked the map again, thinking he might have gone further to check the route, but we weren't supposed to leave the clearing. After about 20 minutes, I started to panic. I hadn't seen any signs of him, no tracks, no sounds, no nothing. The forest seemed to close in on me, every tree looking the same, every path blending into the next. I realized I didn't know where he'd gone or why he wasn't answering me. I stopped and tried to get my bearings, but the more I thought about it, the more it didn't make sense. Daniel wouldn't just leave without telling me, and if something had happened, if he'd fallen or gotten hurt, I would have heard something, right? but there was nothing. I was about to turn back and head for the trailhead when I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, hoping to see Daniel, but instead, a man came walking out from between the trees. He was tall, wearing a faded red flannel shirt and jeans that looked worn from hiking. He had a scruffy beard, the kind that looks like he'd been out there for days. He smiled when he saw me, though it didn't reach his eyes. There was something off about it. "Are you looking for someone?" he asked, his voice casual, too calm for the situation. "Yeah, my friend," I said, trying to sound normal, even though my heart was pounding. "He was right here, but I can't find him. Have you seen anyone around?" The man nodded, his smile growing a little. "Yeah, I saw him. He went off with another guy not too long ago. Looked like they knew each other." That didn't make sense. "What do you mean, another guy? We were the only ones here." The man shrugged, glancing over his shoulder like he was thinking about something. "I saw them walking down the trail together, headed back toward the parking lot. Seemed like they were in a hurry." I shook my head. "No, that's not right. We were alone. There was no one else." He stared at me for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he chuckled softly, like I'd said something funny. "You sure about that?" My stomach dropped. I didn't like the way he was looking at me, the way he kept that smile on his face like he knew something I didn't. "I'm sure," I said, my voice shaky now. "We were alone." The man didn't answer right away. He just stood there, watching me, his hands tucked into his pockets like he wasn't in any hurry to go anywhere. "Well, maybe you should head back and see for yourself. Might have just been a misunderstanding." I wanted to believe him, but something inside me screamed not to trust him. There was no way Daniel had just walked off with someone else without saying anything to me. That wasn't like him. And this guy, something was wrong with him. The way he stood too close, the way his eyes never quite focused on me, always looking past me or around me. "I'll go back," I said, stepping away from him. "Thanks for the help." He didn't move. "You sure you don't want me to come with you? Just in case you get lost." The offer made my skin crawl. "No, I'm fine." He watched me for a moment longer, then nodded. "All right. Be careful out there. You never know who you'll run into." I turned and started walking back toward the trail, forcing myself not to run, even though every instinct was telling me to get away as fast as I could. I could feel his eyes on my back, could hear his footsteps fading into the distance as I moved away from him. But I didn't look back. I didn't want to. The hike back felt like it took forever, every rustle of the trees, every sound making me jump. I kept looking around, expecting to see the man again, but he never showed. The clearing where we'd stopped for lunch was empty when I got there, Daniel's backpack still lying on the ground where he'd left it. But Daniel was gone. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty spot where he should have been, trying to piece together what had happened. The man's words echoed in my head. He went off with another guy. But that didn't make sense. None of it made sense. I grabbed Daniel's backpack and started walking back down the trail, my legs shaking with every step. I didn't know what had happened to him or where he'd gone, but I wasn't staying there any longer. The further I got from that spot, the more I realized how close I'd come to something terrible. When I reached the parking lot, Daniel's car was still there, untouched. But he wasn't. He never came back. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I had just gotten home from work. I was settling in for the evening when I heard the knock on the door. At first, I didn't think much of it. People come by all the time in my neighborhood, usually trying to sell something or leave flyers. Still, I wasn't expecting anyone, and it was already starting to get dark. I looked through the peephole and saw a man standing there, holding a clipboard. He was wearing a dark jacket and a hat pulled low over his face. There wasn't anything about him that stood out, but something made me hesitate. I wasn't in the mood to deal with salespeople, so I thought about just ignoring him, but then he knocked again, louder this time. "Hello? Anyone home?" His voice was muffled through the door. I sighed and unlocked the door but left the chain on. I cracked it open just enough to see his face. He smiled, but it didn't feel right. His eyes were wide, too wide, and he had this look like he was trying too hard to seem friendly. "Hi, ma'am," he said, his voice too cheerful. "I'm with a new company in the area. We're offering some great deals on home security systems. Can I come in and show you some options?" I shook my head immediately. "No, thank you. I'm not interested." He didn't seem to hear me, or he just ignored it. He took a step closer, like he was trying to see past the door into my house. "Are you sure? It's a great time to upgrade your system, and we're offering a big discount if you sign up today." "No," I repeated, firmer this time. "I'm not interested. Please leave." His smile faltered for just a second, then came back even wider, almost like it was forced. He didn't move. "You know, a lot of homes around here aren't as safe as people think. You'd be surprised how easy it is for someone to get inside if they really wanted to." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. The way he said it, it didn't sound like a sales pitch anymore. It sounded like a warning. "I have a security system," I said quickly, even though it wasn't true. I had deadbolts and locks, but no alarms or cameras. "I don't need anything." His eyes flicked over my shoulder, scanning the inside of my house again, and for a moment, I thought he was going to push the door open. My hand tightened on the edge of the door, ready to slam it shut if I needed to. "All right, ma'am," he said finally, taking a step back. "If you change your mind, you know where to find us." He handed me a flyer through the crack in the door. His hand lingered just a little too long, brushing against mine in a way that made my skin crawl. I pulled my hand back quickly and shut the door, locking it immediately. I watched him through the peephole as he walked away, but instead of going to the next house, he just stood at the end of my driveway for a minute, looking back at my door. Then, without knocking on any other doors, he got into a car parked a little way down the street and drove off. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just a weird encounter. I tossed the flyer on the counter without even looking at it and went about the rest of my evening. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The way he'd looked at me, the way he'd lingered, it felt wrong. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I came home, I found myself glancing around, half expecting to see him standing there again. But nothing happened, and I started to convince myself that I was overreacting. Then, a few nights later, I noticed a car parked across the street from my house. It was dark, but I could just make out the outline of a figure sitting in the driver's seat. At first, I thought it was just a neighbor or someone visiting, but the car didn't move. It just sat there, the headlights off, the engine running. I tried not to panic. It was probably nothing, just someone waiting for a friend or something. But when I went to bed, I kept checking out the window, and the car was still there. It didn't leave until well after midnight. The next morning, I saw the same car again, parked in almost the exact same spot. This time, I got a better look at it, a dark sedan, windows tinted so I couldn't see inside. I stared at it for a while, waiting to see if anyone would get out, but no one did. The car just sat there. I was starting to feel uneasy, so I decided to call a friend of mine who lived nearby. I told her about the man at the door and the car parked outside, and she told me to call the police. I didn't want to make a big deal out of nothing, though. I felt like maybe I was just being paranoid. But that night, the car was back again. This time, I could feel my heart racing as I watched it from behind the curtains. It was like whoever was inside knew I was watching. I could feel eyes on me, even though I couldn't see them. I tried to go about my evening like normal, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. The car stayed parked there for hours, just sitting in the same spot. Finally, I decided to call the police. I didn't know what else to do. When they arrived, I felt a little silly explaining everything. The officer asked me some questions, took down the description of the man in the car, and told me they'd patrol the area for a few days. But by the time they got there, the car was gone again. The next couple of days were quiet. No strange cars, no knocks at the door. I started to relax a little, thinking maybe it had all been a coincidence. Maybe the man had just been a pushy salesman after all. Then, one night, I woke up to the sound of knocking. It was soft at first, barely audible, like someone tapping on the glass. I froze in bed, listening, my heart pounding in my chest. There it was again, tap, 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 right outside my bedroom window. I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to look. But something made me do it, made me crawl out of bed and peek through the blinds. The man was standing there, right outside my window, his face inches from the glass. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. He didn't move, just stood there, staring at me through the window with that same creepy smile from before. His eyes were wide, unblinking, like he was waiting for something. I grabbed my phone and called the police, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial the number. I didn't take my eyes off the window, but he didn't move. He just stood there, watching me. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. The officers searched the area, but they didn't find anything, no footprints, no signs of forced entry, nothing. I didn't sleep at all that night. I stayed up, sitting by the window with every light in the house on, waiting for him to come back. He never did, at least not while I was awake to see it. The police told me to install cameras, to be more careful, and I did. But even now, every time I hear a knock at the door, my heart races. Every time I see a car parked across the street, I feel like someone is watching me. I'll never forget his face, or the way he smiled at me through the window. And sometimes, late at night, I still hear that soft, tapping sound outside my window, like he's reminding me that he knows where I am. It was a Wednesday night, a cool evening perfect for a jog. I had just finished dinner and felt restless, so I decided to head to the park near my apartment. I often ran at night, when the streets were quieter and the air was crisp. I grabbed my running shoes, tied my hair back, and set out. The park was just a few blocks away, and I liked the winding paths and the trees that surrounded them. As I entered the park, the familiar sounds of rustling leaves and distant laughter greeted me. I put on my favorite playlist and began to run, feeling the rhythm of my feet hitting the pavement. Everything felt normal at first, and I enjoyed the solitude. About 10 minutes into my run, I noticed a shadowy figure about 100 feet behind me. At first, I thought nothing of it. It could have been another jogger. But when I glanced back again, the figure seemed to match my pace. I quickened my stride, trying to shake the feeling of being watched. The figure sped up too. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I turned a corner, picking up speed. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. I was not a paranoid person, but something about this felt wrong. The figure kept shadowing me, always staying at a distance but never losing ground. I glanced back once more, and it was still there, close enough that I could see it was a man, tall and lean, dressed in dark clothing. My instincts kicked in. I had to get out of the park. I turned onto a path leading toward the exit, but as I rounded the bend, the man suddenly blocked my path. I skidded to a halt, trying to catch my breath. "Why are you in my park?" he asked, his voice low and cold. I took a step back, trying to gauge whether I could get around him. "I'm just jogging," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "I come here often." He didn't move. His eyes seemed to glint in the dim light from the street lamps. I thought about running past him, but he looked like he was ready for a confrontation. "You shouldn't be here at this time." "This is our park," he said, stepping closer, blocking my way again. I wanted to tell him that it was a public park, that I had every right to be there, but I didn't want to provoke him further. I could see the anger in his posture, how he stood rigid and tense. My heart raced, and I glanced around. There was no one else in sight. "Look, I'm going to leave now," I said, hoping to defuse the situation. I didn't mean to intrude. He shook his head, almost like he found my words amusing. "It's too late for that," he said, stepping even closer. I could smell something foul on him, like sweat mixed with something rotten. Panic began to rise in my chest. I needed to act fast. Without thinking, I turned and sprinted back the way I came. I heard his footsteps behind me, getting closer. I could not let him catch me. I ran faster than I ever had, darting through the paths, trying to remember which way led to the exit. The shadows twisted around me, making it hard to tell where I was going. I glanced over my shoulder and saw him gaining on me. I pushed harder, lungs burning as I rounded another corner. I saw the park entrance ahead, the light spilling out onto the street. If I could just reach that light, I might be safe. But he was not far behind. I could hear his footsteps echoing in the night, the sound like a drumbeat of dread. I thought of calling for help, but there was no one around. The park felt like a dark tunnel, closing in on me. I finally reached the entrance, and without slowing down, I burst into the street. I didn't stop running until I was a few blocks away, my legs screaming and my heart racing. I turned down an alleyway, just wanting to put some distance between me and that man. I finally slowed down, panting heavily, leaning against a wall to catch my breath. I looked back to see if he had followed me, but I didn't see him. The streets were empty, just a few streetlights illuminating the pavement. I waited for what felt like forever, but nothing happened. I felt like I could finally breathe again. Shakily, I pulled out my phone and called a friend. I explained everything, my voice shaky as I recounted the encounter. She listened carefully, her concern evident. "You need to report this to the police," she said firmly. When I hung up, I felt a mixture of relief and fear. I had escaped, but the memory of that man stayed with me. I waited for the police to arrive, keeping a watchful eye on the street, feeling vulnerable. After they arrived, I recounted the details of what happened, my heart still racing. They took my statement and promised to patrol the area. As I walked back to my apartment with them, I looked over my shoulder every few seconds, half expecting to see the man lurking in the shadows again. But I never saw him. That night, I locked my doors and checked the windows, feeling safer in the familiar surroundings of my home. The encounter left me shaken, but it also taught me to be more aware of my surroundings. I never jogged in that park at night again. The fear of that dark figure lurking in the shadows haunted me, a reminder that sometimes danger can be closer than it seems. I was driving back from a weekend trip. It was late, much later than I had planned to be on the road. I'd gotten lost earlier, which pushed everything back, and by the time I found my way again, it was almost pitch black. My GPS wasn't doing much to help either, losing signal every few minutes. I didn't want to stop, though. The road I was on was remote, no other cars, no lights except my own headlights, and nothing around but trees. Endless trees. It had been like that for the past hour. Just me and the road. I hadn't seen any signs or houses or even gas stations in a long time, which was starting to make me nervous. I was in the middle of nowhere, and the thought of breaking down out here was in the back of my mind. But the car was running fine, so I kept going, figuring I'd hit something eventually, a town, a rest stop, anything. Then I saw it. At first, I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, the way the headlights hit something up ahead, but as I got closer, I realized it was real. There was something blocking the road. Not a full-on barricade or anything official, just a few orange cones set up in a line and what looked like a piece of wood lying across the road. It was weird. There weren't any signs or warning lights or anything like that, just those cones in the wood. I slowed down, trying to figure out what it was about. The cones weren't spread out too far, so I thought maybe I could just go around them. But right as I was thinking that, two men stepped out from behind a tree on the side of the road. I wasn't expecting that. They didn't have reflective vests or anything like that, nothing that would make them look like they were supposed to be there. Just regular clothes, jeans, jackets, and boots. One of them had a cap pulled low over his face, and the other had his hood up. They walked over toward the front of my car, and my heart started to race. I rolled down my window just a crack, enough to talk but not enough for them to reach in. My hands were gripping the steering wheel, and I could feel the sweat starting to build up in my palms. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound calm, even though my gut was telling me something wasn't right. The guy with the hood on leaned down so his face was level with my window. He gave me a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Hey there," he said. "Just a little roadblock. We're doing some work up ahead." I glanced past him, down the road. It was completely dark, nothing but trees. No lights, no signs of construction, nothing. Just the road disappearing into the woods. "What kind of work?" I asked, my voice coming out a little shakier than I wanted. "Tree clearing," the other guy answered. He was standing back a bit, closer to the cones, just watching me. He had his hands in his pockets, but something about the way he stood, the way he was watching, it didn't feel right. "Can I go around?" I asked, eyeing the cones. It didn't look like they were set up too tightly. I could probably squeeze by if I had to. The guy with the hood smiled again, that same smile that made my skin crawl. "No need for that," he said. "We'll move everything for you. Just give us a minute." I watched as he walked over to the piece of wood in the road and bent down like he was going to pick it up. But then I saw something that made my stomach drop. It wasn't a piece of wood. It was a long, flat board with nails sticking out of it, the kind they used to puncture tires. And the guy wasn't moving it out of the way. He was adjusting it, making sure it was lined up perfectly with my tires. My heart was pounding in my chest now. I glanced at the guy near the cones. His hand was out of his pocket, and he was holding something, a crowbar. He wasn't even trying to hide it. I realized what was happening, and I knew I couldn't stay there. I couldn't let them trap me. Without thinking, I slammed the car into reverse and hit the gas. The tires screeched as I backed up, and I could see the guy with the crowbar start to move toward me, but I didn't give him a chance. I whipped the wheel around, turning the car to the side, and floored it. The car shot forward, bouncing over the edge of the road and onto the shoulder. I could hear the scraping of branches against the side of the car, but I didn't care. I just needed to get out of there. I heard one of the men shout something, but I didn't stop to listen. My heart was racing, and I could feel the panic setting in. I was back on the road now, speeding past the cones and the men, the dark trees rushing by on either side of me. I didn't look back. I drove for what felt like forever, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights behind me, but there was nothing. Just the darkness. Eventually, I came across a small town, a few houses, a gas station, and a diner. I pulled into the gas station, parked under the bright lights, and just sat there for a few minutes, trying to catch my breath. My heart was still pounding, and my hands were shaking. After a while, I went into the diner and asked the guy behind the counter if there were any roadworks or tree clearing happening on the road I had just come from. He gave me a confused look and shook his head. "No," he said. "There's nothing out there but woods. No construction this time of year." I didn't tell him what happened. I didn't tell anyone. I just filled up my car and kept driving, sticking to the main roads this time. I don't know what those men were planning, but I know one thing for sure: they weren't there to help. I had just moved into a new house, excited for a fresh start. The neighborhood seemed nice, with tall trees lining the streets and friendly faces here and there. I unpacked my boxes and slowly made the house feel like home. But not long after I settled in, things started to feel off. It began with little things. I would see my neighbor across the street standing on his porch, watching me as I watered my plants or brought in groceries. At first, I thought he was just curious about the new person in the neighborhood. I waved a few times, but he never waved back. He simply stared with a blank expression, and it made my skin crawl. As days went by, he started showing up more often. I would catch him peeking through his curtains when I left for work or coming outside when I was on my evening jog. It was unsettling, but I tried to brush it off. I told myself he was probably just lonely. Maybe he had been living there a long time and was curious about the new neighbor. Then one evening, as I was bringing in the trash cans, he approached me. His demeanor shifted from quiet observer to something more aggressive. "You should be careful," he said, his voice low. I looked at him, confused. "Careful about what?" I asked, my heart beginning to race. "About who you let in," he replied, eyes narrowing. "Not everyone has your best interest at heart." His words hung in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. I could feel a chill creep down my spine. I wanted to tell him to leave me alone, but I simply nodded and backed away toward my front door. From that point on, he became more brazen. I would find him standing at the edge of his yard, watching me with a smirk. It was as if he took pleasure in my discomfort. I started feeling paranoid, looking over my shoulder every time I left my house. The fear settled deep in my stomach like a stone. I wanted to confront him, to tell him to stop, but I felt trapped. What if he got angry? One night, after a long day at work, I decided to take a walk to clear my mind. I hoped the fresh air would help. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I turned around several times, half expecting to see him lurking behind a tree or a bush. Each time, I found nothing. I tried to calm myself, focusing on the moonlight and the sound of my footsteps. When I returned home, I saw him standing on his porch again. This time, it felt like a challenge. I was tired of being afraid. I decided to confront him. I took a deep breath and approached his yard, my heart pounding. Why are you always watching me? I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked at me, ice cold and calculating. Because I know what you do when you think no one is watching, he said. His smile twisted into something sinister. You should be careful, you know. There are people out there who would take advantage of someone like you. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? I asked, feeling a mix of anger and fear. You think you can just move in here and act like it is all normal? He sneered. I see you. I know when you leave and when you come back. I know who visits you. I know your routine. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The implications of his words hit me hard. He had been watching me, tracking my movements. I realized then that this was not just a harmless neighborly curiosity. He was dangerous. I took a step back, trying to maintain some distance between us. You need to stop this, I said firmly, though my voice trembled slightly. I will call the police if you do not leave me alone. His laughter echoed in the night, chilling me to the bone. Go ahead. They will not believe you. You are just a woman in a new house. I can be here whenever I want, and you will never know. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, anger mingling with fear. You are sick, I shouted, turning to leave. Get away from me. As I walked away, I could feel his eyes on me, a suffocating weight that pressed down on my back. I hurried into my house, locking the door behind me. My heart raced, and I leaned against the door, trying to steady my breath. I could not believe this was happening. I had wanted a fresh start, not this nightmare. That night, I sat in my living room with all the lights on, my phone in hand. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but I felt so alone. I was afraid of what he might do next. I made a plan to install security cameras the next day. I needed to protect myself. Over the next few days, I kept my curtains drawn and avoided looking outside. I only left the house when I had to. I was on high alert, feeling like I was living in a prison. I ordered takeout instead of going to the grocery store. I even considered asking friends to come stay with me for a while. Then one afternoon, I saw a package on my porch. My heart raced, and I hesitated before opening the door. I peered out and saw him standing across the street, arms crossed and a smug look on his face. I knew that whatever was in that package was from him. It made me sick. I grabbed my phone and took a picture of him, hoping it would serve as evidence later. Then I called the police, explaining the situation. They assured me they would send someone over, but I knew they wouldn't be able to do much unless he did something more concrete. When the officer arrived, I showed him the picture and explained everything that had happened. He listened intently but had that familiar look of skepticism. We can keep an eye on him, he said, but unless he actually threatens you or tries to harm you, there is not much we can do. I felt my heart sink. It was not enough. But I made a vow then and there. I would not let him intimidate me anymore. I installed the security cameras that weekend and kept them running day and night. For weeks, I remained vigilant, but the harassment continued. I noticed him on the cameras, lurking near my property, but he never came too close. I filed another report with the police each time he did, hoping it would build a case against him. One day, I decided I had enough. I reached out to a local news station, sharing my story. The reporter showed up, cameras rolling, and I recounted my experiences with the neighbor. I wanted everyone to know what was happening, to shine a light on his behavior. The next day, the news ran my story. I felt a surge of relief as I saw my words reach a wider audience. But my neighbor's response was immediate. He confronted me that night, furious. "You have no idea what you've done," he hissed, face twisted in rage. "You will regret this." but I stood my ground. I called the police, and they arrived quickly. They took him away, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I finally felt safe. In the weeks that followed, the police kept a watchful eye on him, and I learned he had a history of harassment. I had taken back my power, and with each passing day, I felt the grip of fear loosen. I kept my cameras running and continued to be vigilant, but now there was a sense of hope. I had faced my nightmare and survived. I would not be a victim in my own home. I showed up to work a bit earlier than usual that morning. I didn't have any real reason, just couldn't sleep, so I figured I'd get a head start on things. It was quiet when I walked into the office, which wasn't all that surprising. I was used to the sound of buzzing fluorescent lights and the hum of the AC, but it was still a little eerie when the place was empty. The first thing I noticed was that Ben's desk was empty. He was always there early. Not like super early, but he usually beat me by at least 10 minutes. Ben wasn't one of those people who would randomly take a day off without telling anyone, and if he had called in sick, I would have known. He wasn't one to slack off either. I sat down at my desk, logging into my computer, and glanced over at his chair again. It was still empty. His computer was off, and his chair was pushed in neatly. I thought it was odd, but maybe he had car trouble or something. I didn't think much of it at first. A little while later, my phone buzzed on my desk. It was a text from Ben. "Hey, are you at work yet?" I smiled, figuring he was probably running late. I texted him back, "Yeah, just got here." "Where are you?" A few seconds passed, and my phone buzzed again. "I need help. Please." I blinked at the screen. That was weird. Ben wasn't the type to joke around, and he definitely didn't send texts like that unless something was wrong. I started typing back, but before I could hit send, another text came through. "They're following me." Now my heart started racing a bit. I glanced around the office. Still empty. I stood up from my chair, pacing a little as I typed, "What's going on? Who's following you?" The 3 dots popped up like he was typing, but then nothing. A few minutes passed, and I was getting more and more anxious. I called him, but it went straight to voicemail. No answer. I sat back down, staring at my phone, hoping he'd text again and say it was some kind of misunderstanding. But then, my phone buzzed one more time. "Don't call. Just listen. Please." That was it. Just those words. I felt a chill run down my spine. This didn't feel like a prank or anything, and Ben wasn't someone to mess with people like this. I called him again, despite what the text said. I needed to know what was going on. The phone rang for a few seconds, and then someone picked up. But it wasn't Ben. The voice on the other end was low, slow. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman at first. They just said, "You shouldn't have called." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Who is this? Where's Ben? There was a pause on the other end, just the sound of breathing. Then they hung up. I stared at my phone, my hand trembling. That voice, it was flat, emotionless. It wasn't Ben. I didn't know what was happening, but it felt wrong. I stood up and looked around the office again. Still empty. My stomach was in knots, and I didn't know what to do. I tried calling Ben again, but this time it didn't even ring. Straight to voicemail. I couldn't just sit there. I grabbed my bag, hurried out of the office, and headed for the parking lot. I had to figure out what was going on. Maybe I was overreacting, but something about those texts and that voice, it didn't sit right with me. When I got to my car, I sat there for a minute, debating whether to call the police. But what would I say? My coworker sent me a weird text and now some stranger answered his phone? It didn't sound like enough to raise alarms, at least not yet. As I sat there, another text came through. This one was from Ben's phone, but the message didn't feel like it was from him. Stop looking for him. It's too late. That's when I panicked. I didn't care if I sounded crazy. I called the police. I explained everything, how Ben hadn't shown up to work, the strange texts, the call from the stranger. The dispatcher told me to stay put, that they'd send someone to the office to check things out. I didn't go back inside. I couldn't. I stayed in my car, gripping the steering wheel, watching the entrance to the building. My heart was racing, and every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. But there were no more messages, just dead silence from Ben's phone. It took the police about 20 minutes to get there. They asked me a bunch of questions, and I showed them the texts and explained the phone call. They told me they'd try to trace the number and see if they could find out what was going on. I waited in the parking lot while they went into the building to look around. After what felt like forever, they came back and told me they couldn't find anything out of the ordinary. Ben's desk was just like I'd seen it, empty, no signs of struggle, no indication of where he might have gone. One of the officers asked if I knew where Ben lived, and I gave them his address. They said they'd check it out and let me know if they found anything, but they told me to go home for now. There wasn't much else I could do. I drove home, my mind racing the whole way. Who had answered Ben's phone? What did they mean by it's too late? None of it made sense. Later that day, the police called me back. They said they'd gone to Ben's apartment, but he wasn't there. His car was gone, and there were no signs of foul play. They said they put out a missing persons report, but they didn't sound too hopeful. People go missing all the time, they told me. Sometimes they just leave without telling anyone. But I knew Ben. He wouldn't just disappear like that. The next few days were a blur. I kept checking my phone, hoping for more texts or some kind of clue, but there was nothing. The police didn't have any leads, and Ben's phone was still disconnected. Then, about a week later, I got one last text. It was from an unknown number, but the message was clear. Don't come looking for him again. I don't know who sent it. I don't know what happened to Ben. But I haven't gone back to the office since, and I never will. I was driving home after a long day at work, tired and ready to just collapse on my couch. The road stretched before me, empty except for the occasional rustle of trees on the side. It was one of those deserted stretches where you could easily feel isolated. As I turned the radio down, I noticed a figure by the roadside, a hitchhiker, thumb out and looking desperate. I slowed my car and rolled down the window. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to sound friendly. "Just a little further down," he said. "Could you take me there?" I hesitated for a moment. It was late, and I had always been taught to be cautious about picking up strangers. But something about his demeanor made me think he was harmless. He looked like he had been on the road for a while. His clothes were worn, but he didn't seem threatening. "All right, hop in," I said. He opened the door and slid into the passenger seat. I could smell sweat mixed with something earthy, but I ignored it. I put the car back in gear and drove on. The silence filled the space between us at first, just the sound of the tires on the asphalt. After a minute, he turned to me and said, "Thanks for stopping. Not many people do." "No problem. I know what it's like to be stranded out here." I tried to keep the conversation light. "You traveling far?" "Just moving around, he said. "Trying to find a place that feels right." His eyes were fixed on me, studying me in a way that made me uneasy. "You ever feel lost?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "But I think we all do at some point." He nodded slowly, as if he understood something deeper than what I was saying. "You have a nice car." "Is it new?" "It's a few years old," I replied, glancing at him. "Why you ask?" "Just curious. You seem like someone who has their life together." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "You work in finance, right?" My heart dropped. "How do you know that?" "Just a guess," he said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "I could tell from your clothes. You look like someone who deals with numbers." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Yeah, I do," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What about you? What do you do?" He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I'm more of a drifter. I like to observe people." The way he said it made my skin crawl. I turned my eyes back to the road, trying to focus on the headlights ahead. "That sounds interesting," I said, forcing a smile. "People are fascinating," he continued, his tone almost conspiratorial. "Everyone has a story. It's amazing how much you can learn just by watching." I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. "So you just watch people?" "Sure. It's like a game, really." He leaned back in his seat, his gaze never leaving me. "But some stories are more intriguing than others." I shifted in my seat, glancing at him nervously. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, a smirk playing at the corners of his lips. "I've been watching you for a while." My heart raced. "What are you talking about?" "Your daily routine," he said, his voice steady and calm. "I see you go to work, grab coffee at the same place every morning. You talk to the same barista. You leave the office at 5:30 sharp. Very predictable." A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. "That's not normal," I said, my voice coming out sharper than I intended. He shrugged. "It's just a hobby of mine. It helps me learn how to blend in." "Blend in?" I echoed, my pulse quickening. "What does that even mean?" He smiled, but it was not a comforting smile. Being unnoticed. You're so busy with your life, you never look around to see what's happening." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "You're making me uncomfortable," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I think I'll just drop you off here." "Why would you do that?" he asked, tilting his head. "We're having a nice conversation." I forced a laugh, hoping to lighten the mood. "I just think I've changed my mind about giving you a ride." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a low whisper. "But you should know I've already been in your house." Panic surged through me. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Your windows were open," he said, glancing out the window as if he were recalling a pleasant memory. "I thought it was odd that you would leave them like that. So inviting." I slammed on the brakes, bringing the car to a sudden halt. "Get out," I said, my voice firm. He chuckled softly, like I had told a joke. "Come on, you wouldn't really leave me out here, would you?" I turned to him, my hands shaking. "Get out of my car now." "Why are you scared?" he asked, his smile fading. "I just want to talk." "No, you want something else," I shot back, my heart pounding in my chest. "Maybe," he said, shrugging. "But it would be so much easier if you just let me stay. After all, I know where you live." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I wanted to scream, but I knew I had to stay calm. I reached for my phone, fingers trembling as I dialed 911. "I need the police," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "There's someone in my car." He lunged forward, grabbing my wrist and yanking my phone away. "Don't you dare," he growled. I fought back, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I kicked the door open, hoping to create some distance. "Get out," I shouted, my voice breaking. He hesitated for a moment, then released his grip. I stumbled out of the car, my heart racing. I could hear my own breathing, loud and frantic, drowning out everything else. I dashed away from the car, but before I could get too far, he called out, "You can't run from me. You can't escape your own life." I turned around, ready to scream for help. "Someone help me." I yelled, but there was no one around. The road was deserted, and the shadows felt like they were closing in. Then, I saw headlights in the distance. A car approaching, and I felt a rush of hope. I turned back toward him, and he was still there, watching me with an unsettling calm. The approaching car slowed, and I ran toward it, waving my arms frantically. The driver rolled down the window. "What's wrong?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "Please, help." "This man is," I started, but before I could finish, the hitchhiker stepped closer, a menacing smile creeping across his face. "I think she is confused," he said, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "She just needs a ride back home." The driver looked at me, then back at him, uncertain. "Do you need help?" "Yes," I cried, feeling desperation clawing at my throat. "Please don't leave me with him." The driver's expression shifted, and he reached for his phone. "I'm calling the police," he said, clearly seeing the tension. As soon as the hitchhiker realized the situation was turning against him, his demeanor changed. He took a step back, raising his hands in mock surrender. "I was just having a conversation," he said, but there was a wildness in his eyes. "No need to escalate things. Get away from me," I shouted, pointing toward the driver. "Stay back." The hitchhiker glanced from me to the car, his expression hardening. "You don't want to do this," he said, the calmness replaced with anger. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." But the driver was already on the phone, and I felt a rush of relief. Within moments, I could hear sirens in the distance. The hitchhiker's eyes darted to the road, and I took a step toward the driver's side, hoping to create distance. "Fine," he said, his voice low. "You can have your fun for now, but I will see you again." He backed away slowly, hands raised, before turning to blend into the shadows. The police arrived just as he disappeared into the darkness. The driver rushed to my side, and I could see the concern in his eyes. I explained everything, and they took my statement. They assured me they would patrol the area and keep an eye out for him. I was shaken but relieved. They had taken my fears seriously. I learned later that the hitchhiker had a history of disturbing behavior, but at least I was safe for now. I drove home slowly, shaking with the adrenaline, but knowing I had made it through the night. The next day, I went to get my locks changed and installed security cameras around my home. I wanted to ensure I would never feel that vulnerable again. I had let a stranger into my life, and I would never take that risk lightly again. It was late when I finally decided to stop for the night. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, and I felt exhausted from the drive. I pulled into a small, cheap motel just off the road. The neon sign flickered in the darkness, and the parking lot was nearly empty. I could see a few cars scattered about, but it felt deserted. The motel lobby was dimly lit, the kind of place where the air felt stale. The manager, a middle-aged man with a thick mustache, greeted me with a half-hearted smile. "Looking for a room?" he asked. "Yes, please," I said, trying to sound cheerful. I just wanted to settle in and get some sleep. He handed me a key with a worn wooden tag. "Room 4, he said, pointing down the hallway. "You'll be fine. Not many guests tonight." I nodded, thankful to hear that. I made my way to my room, the door creaking slightly as I opened it. The room was small but clean enough. A faded quilt covered the bed, and the bathroom looked serviceable. I dropped my bag on the bed and stretched, feeling the tension of the road begin to fade away. After a quick shower, I changed into my pajamas and settled on the bed. I pulled out my phone to catch up on messages, but soon enough, I felt the weariness wash over me. I turned off the lights and closed my eyes. In the stillness, I heard a sound. It was faint at first, like a rustling outside my door. I opened my eyes, straining to listen. The noise grew louder, a persistent jiggling of the doorknob followed by a soft knock. My heart raced. "Hello?" I called out, unsure of what I was doing. There was no answer, just the sound of the knob rattling again. I got out of bed, still half asleep, and approached the door. I peeked through the peephole but saw nothing, just a dimly lit hallway stretching to the end. I felt a chill creep down my spine. I backed away, my mind racing. Was I imagining things? I took a deep breath and decided to call the front desk. The manager answered almost immediately. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice friendly but flat. "There's someone outside my room," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "They keep trying to open the door." He paused. "No one else has checked in tonight. You're the only guest." "That can't be right," I said, my voice rising. "Someone is definitely out there." "I assure you, I would know," he replied, his tone now a little more firm. "Just lock your door and you'll be fine." I hung up, my heart racing even faster. I went to the window, pulled the curtains aside, and looked out. The parking lot was empty, just the flickering lights of the sign in the distance. I could feel the air around me grow heavy. I was alone, and yet I didn't feel safe. After a few moments of silence, the noise returned. This time it was louder, more insistent. Someone was knocking softly at first, then harder. I stumbled back to the door, heart pounding in my chest. "Who's there?" I called, but no one responded. A surge of fear gripped me. I was alone in a strange place with no one around. I backed away from the door, not knowing what to do. The knocking stopped, but the unsettling feeling in the air only grew. I sat on the edge of the bed, unsure if I should call the police or wait it out. Just as I thought the worst was over, I heard it again, a slow scraping sound, like fingernails running along the wood. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I grabbed my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed for help. 911, what's your emergency? A calm voice answered. "I'm at a motel," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "I think someone is trying to get into my room. Can you tell me the address?" I quickly relayed the details, and the operator assured me help was on the way. As I hung up, I heard footsteps outside, heavy and deliberate. My heart dropped. Whoever it was, they were still there. I quickly locked the bathroom door and crouched down, hoping to remain unnoticed. I could hear the footsteps drawing closer, the soft sound of someone breathing outside. The silence was deafening, interrupted only by my own rapid heartbeat. Minutes passed like hours. Just when I thought I might be safe, the doorknob rattled again, more forcefully this time. I pressed my back against the wall, praying that whoever was out there would go away. But instead, I heard the manager's voice. "Is everything okay in there?" he called. My heart sank. "No! Someone is trying to get in." I shouted back. "Just stay calm, I'm coming," he replied. I could hear him moving quickly down the hall. Just as the manager reached my door, I heard a heavy thud against it. "Open up," a voice called out, deeper and rougher than the manager's. "Let me in." I felt a surge of terror. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice breaking. The manager's voice came again, firm and protective. "Get away from that door." There was a moment of silence, and then I heard the sound of footsteps retreating. I didn't know what was happening outside, but I didn't dare move. The seconds dragged on, and I remained frozen, afraid to breathe. The manager knocked on the door, sounding frantic. "Are you all right? Open up." I unlocked the bathroom door, my hands shaking, and stepped out. I slowly opened the room door, and there stood the manager, his face pale. "Are you hurt?" he asked, scanning the room. "No," I said, feeling weak. He glanced down the hall, then back at me. "I didn't see anyone. I don't know who that was." Just then, the police arrived, their lights flashing brightly outside. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The officers came into the room, asking questions and checking the premises. They were reassuring and professional, and I felt a little more secure now that they were there. After a thorough search of the area, one of the officers returned. "No one is around, but we will keep an eye on this place. You should get back home as soon as you can." The manager stood with me as the officers spoke, still looking unsettled. "You were right to call us," one of the officers said. "We'll patrol the area throughout the night." Once the officers left, I turned to the manager. "What happened? Who was that?" He shook his head, his brow furrowed. "I don't know. I've never had anything like this happen before." "Are you sure I'm safe to stay here?" I asked, feeling a surge of anxiety. He looked me in the eye, his expression serious. "I would recommend you find another place to stay tonight." After a few more minutes of uncertainty, I gathered my belongings and drove away from that motel. The feeling of being watched lingered in my mind, but I knew I was finally leaving that unsettling place behind. As I drove back to the highway, the weight of fear slowly began to lift, replaced by relief. I was free. It was a bright Saturday morning when I decided to go for a hike. The weather was perfect, with clear skies and a gentle breeze. I drove to the nearby nature reserve, excited to escape into the woods for a while. I packed my backpack with water and snacks, slipped on my hiking boots, and set off down the main trail. The forest was serene, the only sounds being the crunch of leaves underfoot and the distant chirping of birds. I felt at peace, surrounded by the tall trees and the scent of pine. After a while, I took a fork in the path that I had not explored before, eager to see where it might lead. As I walked, the trail became narrower and less traveled. I noticed how quiet it was, almost too quiet. I began to feel a little uneasy but pushed it aside. After about 30 minutes, I stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood a wooden post. Tacked to it was a bright poster. I approached it, squinting at the sun reflecting off the paper. It was a missing persons poster. The picture caught me off guard. The face looking back at me was nearly identical to my own. Same hair color, same build, even the same slight smile. My stomach dropped. I leaned in closer, reading the details. The name was different, but the likeness was uncanny. I tried to shake off the unsettling feeling creeping up my spine. I took out my phone to take a picture of the poster, thinking I could report it later. As I pulled it out, I noticed movement from the corner of my eye. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there. Just the trees swaying slightly in the breeze. I frowned, feeling a chill wash over me. It was probably just a deer, I told myself. I stepped back from the post, still staring at the poster. The missing person had disappeared just a few months ago, not far from where I stood. I couldn't shake the strange sense of foreboding as I turned to leave the clearing. My heart raced a little faster. I walked back towards the main trail, trying to focus on the sounds around me. The rustling of leaves, the distant call of a bird. I felt a sudden urge to pick up my pace, my instinct screaming that I should not linger. As I moved, I heard a snap of a twig behind me. I stopped, my heart pounding. "Hello?" I called, my voice shaky. The silence that followed was heavy. I waited for a response, but nothing came. I took a deep breath and started walking again. A few moments later, I felt it. The sensation of being watched. I glanced over my shoulder and saw a shadowy figure standing behind a cluster of trees. It was difficult to see clearly, but there was definitely someone there. They were watching me. My heart thudded in my chest, panic starting to set in. I turned and quickened my pace, hoping to reach the main trail before I lost my nerve. I glanced back again, but the figure was gone. Had I imagined it? I picked up the pace even more, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The trail began to twist and turn, and I tried to calm myself down. Maybe it was just a hiker like me, taking a break or exploring. I thought about the missing person again. Had they seen something, too? I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than I understood. Then, I heard footsteps behind me. I froze, listening intently. They were light, but they were there. I started walking faster, my heart racing. I reached the fork in the trail and glanced back. The figure appeared again, just at the edge of the trees, and this time I could see them clearer. A man, tall and lean, wearing a dark hoodie that obscured his face. I turned and bolted down the path, my mind racing with fear. I could hear him moving behind me, his footsteps quickening. I felt panic surge through me. I needed to get away. I ran as fast as I could, ignoring the branches that scratched my arms. My lungs burned, and I could hear the man behind me, closing in. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. I had to think. My phone. I fumbled for it in my pocket while I ran, but my hands were shaking. I could hear him getting closer, the sound of his breath mixing with the rush of my heart. I finally managed to pull it out and press the emergency number, my thumb trembling as I hit the call button. "Please, please pick up," I whispered, gasping for air. 911, what's your emergency?" A calm voice answered, but I could barely respond. I was too busy focusing on the sound of footsteps behind me. "I'm being followed." I gasped into the phone. "I'm on a trail in the nature reserve." "Stay calm. We are sending help. Can you see any landmarks?" I glanced around, desperate. There is a clearing and a missing person's poster. I shouted. "It looks like me. He's right behind me." I could hear the operator trying to calm me, but I was losing focus. I had to keep moving. I ran harder, willing my legs to go faster. I could see the path starting to widen again. If I could just reach the main area, I would feel safer. But then I tripped. My foot caught on a root, and I fell hard to the ground. Pain shot through my ankle, but I had no time to dwell on it. I scrambled to my feet and looked back. The man was closer now, his face still hidden in the shadow of his hood. "Stop," he shouted, his voice low and menacing. "You need to come back." I turned and ran again, ignoring the pain shooting through my ankle. I could see the end of the trail ahead, where it opened into the main area of the park. I pushed myself harder, fear fueling my every step. I burst into the clearing and skidded to a stop. There were a few families around, children playing and adults chatting. I ran toward them, shouting for help. "Help! Someone is following me." People turned, their faces filled with confusion and concern. The man behind me slowed as he entered the clearing, looking around nervously. He stepped back, seemingly realizing he was no longer hidden. "Leave him alone," a man shouted, standing protectively in front of me. "What do you want?" The man hesitated, looking around at the gathering crowd. I felt a surge of hope. The presence of others seemed to deter him. He turned and walked away, disappearing back into the trees. The police arrived moments later, responding to my frantic call. They spoke to me, asking questions about what had happened. I felt shaky, the adrenaline finally starting to fade. They searched the area but could not find the man. Afterward, they gave me a ride back to my car. They assured me they would patrol the area, keeping an eye out for anyone suspicious. I was grateful to them, but I still felt a lingering fear. I drove home that day, my mind racing with thoughts of the missing person and the man who had been watching me. I would never forget that encounter, the feeling of being hunted. I was on a work trip, staying at this hotel that looked a little nicer than the ones I usually end up in. It was one of those chain hotels where you know what to expect: basic, clean, no frills. I had been to a few of them before, so I didn't think much about it. I checked in late, probably around 8 or 9 in the evening. The lobby was quiet, and the girl at the front desk barely looked up from her computer when she handed me the room key. Just the usual routine. I got to the room, but when I tried to swipe the key card, nothing happened. I thought maybe I had swiped it wrong, so I tried again, but still, the light didn't even blink. It was like the card wasn't recognized at all. I was tired, annoyed from traveling, and just wanted to get inside, drop my stuff, and relax. I tried a few more times, hoping it was just a bad angle, but the door wouldn't budge. So I turned around and headed back to the front desk. It was a bit of a walk. My room was at the end of a long hallway on the 3rd floor, and the elevators were slow. When I got back down there, the girl at the desk was still in the same spot, her eyes glued to the screen. I explained the situation, trying not to sound too frustrated, and she seemed confused for a second, like she couldn't believe the card wasn't working. She took my key, gave me a new one without much of an apology, and I headed back up. By then, all I wanted was to get into my room, put on the TV, and wind down before my meeting the next morning. When I got to the door again, I swiped the new card, and it worked immediately. The light blinked green, and the lock clicked open. I felt a small wave of relief. But when I pushed the door open, I froze. There was a man inside the room. He was standing by the bed, in the middle of the room, like he was waiting for something. He had a duffel bag on the floor, and it was clear he was unpacking. He didn't look surprised to see me, though. In fact, he just stared at me like I was the one who had barged in. I stood there in the doorway, not sure what to say. At first, I thought maybe I had the wrong room. Maybe the front desk had given me the wrong key and I had accidentally opened someone else's door. But no, I checked the number. It was definitely my room. I cleared my throat and finally said, "I'm sorry, I think this is my room." He didn't answer right away, just kept looking at me with this blank expression, like he didn't know what to say either. Then he shook his head and said, "No, this is my room. I've been here all night." My stomach dropped. That didn't make sense. I had just checked in, and this room was supposed to be mine. I hadn't seen anyone else on the floor when I got here, and there was no sign of anyone when I first tried to get in. The bed was made, the bathroom door was shut, and there wasn't anything personal in the room when I saw it through the crack the first time I tried my card. I told him that again, insisting that there must be some mistake. I could feel my heart starting to race because something about this didn't feel right. He didn't look like a typical guest. His clothes were plain, kind of wrinkled, and he looked rough, like he hadn't slept in a while. He didn't have that casual attitude most business travelers have, and the more I looked at him, the more something felt off. "I've been here since this morning," he repeated, his voice a little harder this time, like he was starting to get frustrated. I didn't know what to do. My mind was racing with possibilities. Had the front desk made a mistake and double-booked the room? That happens sometimes, right? But then why didn't they tell me? And why was he acting so calm, like he wasn't surprised at all to see me standing there? I took a step back and said, "I'll just go check with the front desk again." He didn't try to stop me, but the way he looked at me as I backed out of the room made my skin crawl. His eyes followed me the whole time, never blinking, never looking away. As soon as I was out of the room, I hurried back down to the front desk, almost jogging by the time I got to the elevator. When I reached the lobby, the girl at the front desk looked surprised to see me again. I told her what had happened, trying to stay calm but probably sounding more panicked than I wanted to. I explained that there was a man in my room, claiming it was his, and that he had a bag, like he had been staying there for a while. She blinked at me, confused, and started typing on her computer. After a minute, she said, "There's no one else booked in that room. You're the only guest assigned to that number." I felt a chill run down my spine. "But he's in there," I said, trying to make her understand. "He has a bag, and he says it's his room." She looked up from her computer, clearly unsure of what to say. "Let me call security," she finally said, reaching for the phone. It felt like forever before security arrived, but when they did, they were just as confused as the front desk girl. They told me to wait in the lobby while they went up to check the room. I sat on one of those stiff lobby chairs, my mind racing, wondering who that man was and how he had gotten into my room. Was he just a confused guest? Was he dangerous? I had no idea. When the security guards finally came back down, one of them walked over to me. "There's no one in the room," he said. I stared at him, not understanding. "What do you mean?" "He was just there. I saw him." The guard shook his head. "The room is empty. We checked everywhere, even the closets. There's no sign of anyone and no personal belongings. The bed's still made, and it looks like no one's been in there at all." I felt a cold sweat break out on my skin. That didn't make any sense. I had just seen the man, seen his bag on the floor, his clothes hanging out of it. There was no way he could have just disappeared in the time it took me to come back down to the lobby and get security. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice shaking. He was right there. He had a duffel bag. I saw him. The guard looked uncomfortable, like he didn't know how to explain it to me. "We checked everywhere," he said again. "There's no one there." They offered to move me to another room, but I was too freaked out to stay. I asked if I could just check out early and find another hotel. The front desk didn't argue. They refunded me without asking any questions, like they didn't want to deal with it either. I spent the rest of the night in a different hotel, but I couldn't sleep. All I could think about was that man, standing there in the middle of my room, acting like he belonged there. How had he gotten in? Where did he go? I never got any answers.